Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku got kicked out of his own flashback. If you guys enjoy this movie, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story Sharkofchaos from AO3. So let's start the video. He remembered hearing a story when he was a kid about a guy who held the sky up. He never thought he would relate. The building was heavy, and he swore he could feel his bones creak under the weight. He blinked away the tears. Shoto had fought his way down to help him, thinking that he could shore the building up with his eyes. He was doing his best not to look at where the man now lay, his sightless dead eyes staring at him accusingly. "Deku, where the fuck are you? Get out of here, the building is coming down." He could hear the pain in 𝐭𝐽𝐻's voice. "I can't." He looked at the child coughing weakly at his feet. He didn't know who she was, but he was hoping someone could get her out. Both her legs were broken. "I have a civilian down here and I can't. Fuck them, Deku. Get out. She's a kid. I'm trying to hold on until someone." "God damn it, Deku, no one is coming. I'm pinned and the fire is spreading. Kiri is down for good." He heard 𝐭𝐽𝐻 sob over the mic and he swore he could feel his heart break. "You have to get out." Something shifted above him and he fell to his knees, barely managing to miss the child. She was awake now and curled up to him, crying in pain. "It's going to be okay, honey. I am here," he told her, trying to comfort her. He bit back the scream as his arm snapped. "Forget the fucking kid and leave, please." Tears were falling onto the girl's face and she weakly reached up and wiped them away. "I'm not going to leave you." He forced a watery smile. "Fuck." He heard the pain in Katsuki's voice. "Deku, the fire is spreading fast. I don't want you to hear this. Do not turn off your mic." It was a demand, but Katsuki just gave a weak laugh. "Not the boss of me, nerd. Listen, I thought I had more time." That we had more. He was cut off by a wet cough. "Don't turn off your mic. 𝐭𝐽𝐻, please." The rubble above him shifted again and he was barely hanging on. "I thought we had more time too. I need to tell you." Before he could finish that thought, there was a crashing sound and the mic went dead. 𝐭𝐽𝐻, please. I have to tell you that I love you. 𝐭𝐽𝐻, hey Mr. Deku." It was the first time in a while the girl had spoken. He couldn't see where the blood was coming from as it dripped from somewhere in her dark hair, but her eyes were sad and kind, if crinkled with pain. "Yeah, honey, don't worry, help is coming." He hated lying, and by the look she shot him she knew it. "Mr. Deku, if you had a wish, what would you wish for?" Her hand tightened on his arm as she tried to pull herself up on her broken legs. Despite the conditions, he thought about it. The first thing he thought was time. He wanted more time. With 𝐭𝐽𝐻, with his friends. He felt like so much was wasted. But what really came to mind was he wished he could go back to when he got his quirk. If he knew then what he knew now, maybe his arms would be strong enough to get them out of here. He would have been able to save Shoto. He wouldn't have wasted so much time. He tried not to scream as the rubble shifted again and he felt another bone snap. "It's okay, Mr. Deku. Dying only hurts for a second." He didn't know if this was dying. 1 second it was dark, and the next a bright light seemed to be growing. Pain. A burning, tearing pain seemed to flash through his entire body, and he closed his eyes, losing the battle with the scream bubbling in his chest. "Eat this. What the fuck?" He opened his eyes and in front of him stood All Might in his former bulking glory, holding out a hair to him. Looking around, he realized he was on the beach, and for once, there was no pain in his body. His younger body. "What the fuck? Young Midoriya. Okay, maybe this was one of those life flashing before your eyes as he died. At least if it was, he would have a chance to see 𝐭𝐽𝐻 again." Taking the hair, he choked it down and tried to remember exactly what he did next. The exam. Oh shit, it had been years since he took the entrance exam. What if he couldn't remember anything? Would he get kicked out of his own flashback? But as he moved through the city, everything felt too much, too real. His breath caught in his throat as he saw Katsuki, his signature teenage scowl on his face. 𝐭𝐽𝐻. Rushing to the blonde boy, he grabbed him. 𝐭𝐽𝐻. He could tell Katsuki wanted to pull away, but something in Nezuko's face gave him pause. "What is it?" "We don't have time right now, but I have so much to tell you. You are the most important person to me and I don't want to keep anything from you." He had never seen that confused puppy look on Katsuki's face before, and it was oddly cute. "Wait for me after the practical, please." Katsuki's face hardened, but he could still see the curiosity burning in those bright red eyes. "Tisk, fine, but only to see what the fuck you are on about." "Whatever you say." Could this be real? Could he really have traveled back in time to a time before everything went to shit? There was so much he could change. Was this a quirk? As he walked into the school, he tried to think about the last thing the little girl said to him. What was it she asked him? Something about a wish. He wished for more time, didn't he? No, that wasn't what he wished for. He wished to go back in time and, oh, he forgot about this part. He interrupted his own thought train as he tripped over the raised brick. Despite his 14-year-old body, he was a trained hero. before Uraraka, who was standing near, could use her quirk to stop his fall. In a practiced move, he rolled forward, popping back to his feet. Damn, in his real time that would have sent pain shooting all the way through his body. He had felt so much older than his 22 years. Oh my god, that was so cool. He turned and smiled at her. It's just using your own momentum to find your footing again. When we are in class together, I can teach you. He forgot how happy she used to be before everything went wrong. If this ended up being permanent, he was going to make sure that she didn't lose that spark. He was going to protect everyone this time. Once the test was in front of him, surprisingly he remembered everything, breezing through. He could feel Katsuki beside him glaring at him. To be honest, having his undivided attention was gratifying. Izuku smirked. God, he remembered a time that he would be flustered and stumbling over words, but there was too much history. He knew the boy too much after all these years. Although he supposed that Katsuki wouldn't know their history. Time travel gave him a headache. Before he knew it, it was time for the practical. He had been so lost in thoughts he missed Tenya yelling at present Mike. What the fuck is going on, nerd? This time under his gruff voice there was a note of something that sounded almost like concern. I promise I will explain everything after the practical. I should have never tried to keep anything from you. Just promise me you will hear me out. He felt like Katsuki was searching his soul as he looked at him. Fine, but you tell me what the fuck is wrong with you as soon as the practical is over. He couldn't help it, and he knew Katsuki would not thank him, or forgive him for that matter, but he threw his arms around the angry blonde, holding him tight. To his credit, he didn't pull away, seeming to understand that Izuku needed this, even though he didn't hug back. Getting to the exam area, this time he was prepared to go when Mike said, pulling full cowling around him like an old friend. He didn't bother counting how many points he was getting, just having fun taking out robots like the others were having. It was only when Iyoma flew by with his naval laser that he was reminded of how much he had to remember. At this point, Iyoma would still be under the threat of All for One. For that matter, none of the League minus Shigaraki would be under his thumb quite yet. He knew because one night when him and Shoto were studying, they tracked 𝗬𝗲𝐻's villain activity. It wasn't until the start of the hero killer getting popular that there were any murders credited to him. Until then it was all petty theft and muggings. Things that, while horrible, could be understood for someone trying to survive. That meant Izuku had a small window of time where he might be able to get through to him. People started running and he could feel the vibrations under his feet. The 0-pointer. He knew he could take it out without destroying his arms. Well, he thought he could. Even with full cowling, he could only use a small percentage of one for all. But what he could be was fast. Within seconds he had her unpinned, and with her lightning them was able to have her whisked away to safety without even spraining his ankle, despite the euphoria of being able to do things right this time. And not embarrassing himself, he didn't even get a lecture from Tenya. Doubt creeped in. Was this cheating? Should he be trying harder to do things the way he had before, even if it meant destroying his body once again? No, he refused. He didn't want to admit it. Before or later, God, time travel was a huge headache. But there were times he almost failed because of the pain his broken and repaired body had been through. He decided that the best course of action would be to tell the truth and let the adults decide. And that shouldn't be such a relief. That he wasn't considered an adult anymore, that he could literally sit back and let someone take care of it. Although that may change if he does tell the truth. And there was the headache again. Young Midoriya, what was that? He perked up as his mentor arrived. Did you see? I did amazing, right? But for some reason All Might did not look happy. I expected you to at least break an arm. You shouldn't be strong enough to use. Oh, I'm not. I think that was at most 2% and I could feel some strain on my bones at that. Wait, the whole time you knew I wouldn't be able to wield it. He was confused. Why didn't All Might look proud of him? Anyway, as I get stronger my body will be able to handle more of one for all. But we need to talk to some people. Can you get me a meeting with Nezu and Aizawa? If things go like they did before, they need to know everything. Everything? You mean expose my quirk? No, young Midoriya, that is quite impossible. This has to be a secret. I thought you understood that. This was not going the way he thought it would. Well, it is my quirk now. And you had your own support system in place. I deserve one of my own. Besides, it isn't just the quirk I need to tell them. I'm sorry, but if you insist on telling people, I am going to have to ask you to return one for all to me. You are apparently the wrong choice. He held his hand out expectantly. I thought you would be obedient and grateful, not talking back to me and not using my quirk properly. A sinking feeling came across him. No, he couldn't give it back. That would change too much. He had to be a hero. How dare you say no to me? Of all the things he expected from the moment he got sent back, All Might striking him across the face was not one of them. No wonder you were such a shitty teacher. You only saw me as an extension of you and your quirk. You never expected me to be my own person. You were supposed to be my legacy. But if you won't obey, I'll find someone who will. Even if I have to rip my quirk out of you myself. All Might was standing over him menacingly, and for the first time ever, Izuku was scared of him. Oi, nerd, am I walking you home or not? He didn't know how long Kaken had been listening, but he had never been more grateful for him. Yeah, I'm coming. He ducked under All Might's arm and practically hid behind the other boy, his heart swelling with affection as Katsuki stepped in front of him, hiding him from view. He glared at the older hero for a few seconds before taking hold of his arm and dragged him away. Izuku still didn't relax until they were off school grounds. As soon as they were a decent distance away, Katsuki slammed him against a wall. Talk Deku. He was so close Izuku could feel his breath on his face and a familiar feeling pulled in his stomach. Oh wow, how the fuck did I not realize I was gay until much later? The shock on the other boy's face made him chuckle. It's a long story, but how do you feel about time travel? Really time travel? Really time travel? Izuku said. He had been moving and thinking since he got sent back, and now the enormity of what happened was weighing on him. Can I? He stopped himself, biting off the request. Spit it out, Deku. Well, Katsuki had been pretty receptive so far and he needed this. He wrapped his arms around the other man, basking in the warmth. Tentatively, one arm came up and patted him on the back. It was too hard, and Katsuki was stiff in his arms, but he was trying and it made the damn break. He squeezed the blonde, digging his face in the crook of his neck, sobbing. The last thing I heard before I was sent back was the comms going dead. You didn't want me to hear you die. There, he said, giving him another little pat. No use crying about shit that won't happen now. I tried to tell All Might, but yeah, I caught the tail end of that show. He pushed Izuku back. So what are we going to do? We need to formulate a plan. There are so many people that we can save. He got out a notebook and began to plan, mumbling under his breath as he wrote down names and dates that he could remember. He could feel the warmth of Katsuki's body as he read over his shoulder. We are going to need some help. Don't worry, I know where we are going to get it. He smiled to himself. He couldn't wait to see everyone. For the next few days he spent time with his mother and researched time travel quirks. They were rare, so rare that if they are discovered, the person is taken by the government and trained to train them. That was an unnerving thought. The day the acceptance discs came, he opened his eagerly. To his confusion, instead of All Might welcoming him to Yua, he got a letter requesting a meeting with Nezu. Well, this wasn't expected. He called Katsuki, freaking out. Quit being dramatic, nerd. We will go see what he wants. Oh, he really needed to get his crush under control. In the future, or past future, he didn't even realize that he was gay until much later. Much less realize the feeling in his tummy wasn't fear, but something honestly much more terrifying. He was going to die a virgin. Again. Thanks, Kaken. He quickly got dressed and met him, and they walked in silence all the way to the school, Izuku too nervous to make small talk. When they got to the gate, he was relieved to see it was Aizawa waiting for them. While the teacher didn't know him and it did hurt, having the man he looked up to almost as a father look at him like he was a stranger, he was happy to see him with both eyes and both legs. You are mumbling, idiot. Katsuki reached out and pinched him hard in the side. What if he hears you? Think of how that would sound. Thanks, Kaken. He pinched him back. Not as hard. The look of surprise and the blush that blossomed across the blonde's face before he looked away was adorable, and he had to bite back a smile. They got to the office and Nezu was there behind his desk. Am I a mouse, a bear, or a dog? I am the principal of UA. Thank you for agreeing to see me, principal. One thing Izuku learned was it was always best to act like he had the upper hand, even if he didn't. It was a strategy that he learned from Nezu, funnily enough, and the mouse creature smiled at him as he sat in one of the chairs. Katsuki took the other seat, leaving Aizawa to lean against the desk. You are very welcome. Love some. He could tell Katsuki and Aizawa were getting impatient, but he was actually having fun. It was like a game, and both players were waiting to see what move the other one would make. It felt like a victory when Nezu leaned forward, resting his chin on his clasped hands. Do you know what this meeting is about, Mr. Midoriya? I'm sure you can tell me. Izuku mimicked his pose, blinking innocently at him. Nezu's smile grew impossibly wider. Well, can you explain to me why I got a phone call from All Might? A hero who, before gave you a glowing letter of recommendation, now says you are unfit to be a hero. Okay, he wasn't going to lie to himself, that one hurt. Would you like your companion and Aizawa to leave? Anything you talk to me about I will just tell Kaken. As for Aizawa, do you think he needs to hear this conversation? He raised his eyebrow in defiance. So you are telling me your companion knows the secrets of your quirk? He sounded surprised, not angry, which was a good sign. You're damn right I do. And I know that All Might punched him in the face for no fucking reason, if that has any bearing on this whole unfit to be a hero shit. Kaken had apparently gotten tired of remaining quiet. At the gleeful look on the mouse's face, he knew he had lost whatever game they were playing, but he wasn't mad. That brings us to the true matter of this meeting. As you know, for liability reasons, every inch of campus is wired for CCTV with sound. He turned his monitor around and the video of his and All Might's altercation played. It was obvious that Aizawa hadn't seen it, the look of alarm growing on his face. Oh yes, that. He took a deep breath. That is a long story. This was the part where if he was in a movie it would just fast forward silently while he explained everything. At the end he was out of breath. Time travel quirks are very rare, Aizawa told him. If the commission found out, She was only 6, I believe. She would be at most a year old right now. I never even got her name. He sighed. Look, I understand if you can't offer me a spot now because of All Might. But I refuse to give up the quirk. He is a shitty teacher, and I thought the first time around it was because he didn't know what he was doing. Now I know that he wanted me to be broken. I don't even know what he wanted, but I won't let him hurt someone else. He remembered the pain of each broken bone. Every time he pushed himself too far because he thought that was the only way. He was going to do better this time. You will be in Aizawa's class, and I will start with your first mission, for lack of a better word. This Dabai, his name is Taoya Todoroki. I will find him and try to stop him from falling farther than he already has. Take heart, Mr. Midoriya, you are not alone. He knew he could trust Nezu, but Aizawa was nodding too. He didn't have to shoulder this alone. So are you going to tell the whole class? Nezu had given him his actual acceptance letter at the meeting, and it was their first day of classes. Kaken was walking with him, and he didn't even get mad that Izuku's hand kept brushing up against him. He felt like a 14-year-old again, butterflies in his stomach. He laughed to himself because he was 14 again. I think telling the whole class would be too much. There would be too many variables to control. But one or two that need to know. Katsuki was always one to be early, so they had plenty of time. Katsuki, in typical fashion, claimed a desk and pulled out his phone, throwing his feet on the desk in front of him. Anyone coming in would assume he was some kind of delinquent. But Izuku knew that he was looking over the reading list he had downloaded onto his phone. He liked people to think his intelligence was effortless, but Izuku knew how much he studied. Katsuki once confessed to him, sometime in the future, that he was scared if he wasn't perfect his mother would not love him anymore. She did put an awful lot of pressure on him, but maybe in this go-around he could get his mom to talk to Auntie Mitsuki. Let her know to lighten up on him. You, get your feet off the desk. Don't you have any respect for? He tuned out Ida and Kaken's argument to focus on the people coming in. He forgot how closed off and tired Shoto, Todoroki, was. That was going to take some getting used to, calling their classmates by their last names until they were closer. Izuku caught Aizawa's eye as he was on the floor and winked at him. Aizawa rolled his eyes and stood quiet. He tossed their gym uniforms at the class. Get dressed and meet me for your quirk test. In the changing room, he was reminded of what a 𝗵𝘃𝗲 was, although he was having his own hard time not being a perv himself. Kaken was changing not far from him. He felt like he was going to have a nosebleed. Still, he made a mental note to let Aizawa know about the short asshole drilled to spy. When they got to the field, the teacher started the test, just as he had before, and Mina made her comment just like before. What was different was after he started the baseball test, he motioned Izuku to his side. Is there anything I need to know? He asked. Yes, actually, Shoto's father. The training he gets at home is thinly veiled abuse. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw 𝗵𝗃 getting close to Momo, reaching out to touch her ass. In 𝗵𝗃, he sexually harassed every female student he came across, and his behavior only got worse as went into heroics. Explain. Your reasoning for not expelling him was logical. Females in heroics get judged and harassed all the time. It does make sense for them to get used to it. However, between your complacency and the Hero Commission covering up for any complaints, he went from just making women uncomfortable to drugging women. When the commission refused to put him in check, the boyfriend of one of his conquests, to put it in his own words, murdered him. He didn't blame Aizawa. No one really thought 𝗵𝗃𝗃 would go that far, not even the girls in class. In fact, some of them blamed themselves for not putting up more of a fuss. Ochako going so far as to get the man transferred out of Tartarus and into a jail for low-risk prisoners where the girlfriend could visit him. He didn't know all the details, just that the girl had a mental breakdown after the attack, and the pressure from the commission to drop the charges almost drove her over the edge. He told him all this, and Aizawa's face got darker and darker. 𝗵𝗃𝗃, you're expelled. He turned back to Izuku. Do you have any ideas for a good replacement? You know the students better than I do. I do actually. Do you mind? Aizawa gave a permissive wave as he went to yell at 𝗵𝗃𝗃. If he remembered correctly, after the welcoming assembly, the classes went back to their classrooms to get syllabuses and introductions. He headed to C Hall looking for Present Mike's class. Knocking, he waited to be let in. You must be Midoriya. I have heard about you. He figured Mike would know who he was. He wondered who would have won the bet, he thought to himself. He had bet that they were already married. Ochako thought they were in love but never confessed to each other. Shoto was convinced they were fraternal twins who found each other late in life and fell in love, unable to be together due to their shared DNA. Can I have Shinso, please? Yes, take your things, in case we finish here before the heroics class is finished with you. Again, he was taken aback by how hard his future friend's face was. What does the oh-so-great heroics class want from me? Need a villain to beat up? No, if we needed a villain, we would just assign someone to play the part. How are you doing today? He smiled as the lavender-haired boy said what he knew he would say. I'm not here to make friends. They got back to the field, and he led him to Aizawa. This is Hitoshi Shinso. His quirk is brainwashing. The strongest version I have ever seen. perfect for underground heroics. His strengths are his creativity, the ability to capture villains easily with minimal damage, and he is quick to think on his feet. Weaknesses include he relies too heavy on his quirk and has not had much combat training or hand-to-hand. Although I believe that is due to quirk discrimination. It's hard to find a teacher when they don't trust you. All in all, he turned to Hitoshi and looked him deep in the eyes, hoping that he could feel the sincerity in his voice. Is perfect for heroics and would make an amazing hero. On one drunken night when they were 17 and giggled through their first kiss together, both wanting to get it over with, too good of friends and too in love with their crushes to go any further. Hitoshi told him even Aizawa didn't tell him those words he had longed to hear for so long. Okay, he'll train with us, and he has until the sports festival to prove he belongs. Take your turn. Izuku gave a sarcastic salute and threw the ball, getting his score when Shinso was called up. So I just can't leave the circle? At Aizawa's confirmation, Hitoshi looked at him. So your name is Izuku? Yes. Well, he guessed he deserved this, he thought as he felt the control of his body leave him. He never not falls for it. Come throw this ball as hard as you can. Oh, he wished Shinso worded that differently. He still tried to rein in his strength as best he could, but he still heard a crack as his arm broke, thankfully only in one spot. Well, some things never change, he told himself as he headed to the nurse's office. Surprisingly, breaking Izuku's arm seemed to mellow out Shinso faster than anything he ever did in the first go-round. The boy had been waiting when he got out of the infirmary, freaked out, all apologetic. He used the excuse he had already, that he was a late bloomer, he couldn't use his quirk until he had gotten stronger. Unfortunately, he wasn't an idiot, so Izuku knew he didn't believe him. That was okay, he had more pressing matters. Him and Katsuki met with Aizawa and Nezu after school ended, Izuku bringing his notebook with everything he had written out. He had just started laying out what he thought needed to happen when All Might burst into the office. Nezu, I really must protest. I told you that boy, and I told you I wasn't going to deny a student a place because of your grudge, especially since you assaulting him could have resulted in a scandal for this school. Nezu glared at him. If we can just speak privately, I can. If you are trying to get rid of Aizawa and Kaken to talk about my quirk, you can stop with the theatrics. They know. He should have expected his reaction, but it still took him by surprise when All Might grabbed him. Immediately both Kaken and Aizawa jumped to his defense, pulling him away from the smaller boy. You ungrateful little brat. I am only trying to make you stronger. If you don't break your bones, how will you ever be able to wield the quirk correctly? That made Izuku pause. What are you talking about? If I keep breaking bones, I am going to be too weak to help people. No, young Midoriya. Every time you break a bone, it heals stronger. You need that strength to wield one for all properly. Izuku was confused. All Might, did the person who passed Ofa to you teach you this? Or a doctor? Or a teacher? He hoped his gut feeling was not right. No, it is from personal experience. He couldn't resist the urge to facepalm. You were never quirkless. He wanted to shake the man, or slap some sense into him. Young Midoriya, you can't just, please shut up, cause the entire time I thought you were just a crappy teacher. I now have to come to terms with the fact my favorite hero is not only a jackass but an idiot as well. He heard Katsuki laugh, and even Aizawa snickered, but Nezu looked intrigued, his eyes focused on him. Please explain, Izuku. The fact that he used his first name made him feel better. Nezu preferred to keep a level of professionalism, a sort of line between him and most humans. Only a few got the privilege of Nezu relaxing his guard. From the moment I was diagnosed quirkless, I researched everything about them. From the glowing baby to animals with quirks. Part of the reason that there were so few quirks in the beginning wasn't because they weren't there, but because they were subtle. Eidetic memories. Swimmers whose muscles didn't secrete the enzyme that made them tired. Dancers who almost hovered for a few seconds during leaps. Things like that were just passed off as natural talent. Even in animals, who is going to notice a deer that is faster than the rest? Or an eagle with better eyesight? Or a frog that can jump extra high? These subtle quirks were everywhere, but as quirks became the norm, the seemingly quirkless became the outlier. There was even a movement at one time to breed the quirkless out based on the Nazis from World War II. While I find the history lesson fascinating and we will speak more about it soon, you believe that All Might has a quirk. Nezu did look interested. Bones that heal stronger after breaking them. A simple X-ray should be able to see if it is true. But we can deal with that later. I need to talk to you about All for One and his first movement against the school. All Might made a horrified noise from where he was still being restrained by Aizawa. Oh yes, I forgot. The first time he didn't mention All for One to me until much later. The first attack comes during a training at the USJ. The press gets a whiff of All Might working here, and Tamura Shigaraki uses that to break in and steal the roster to lead an army of villains in to attack us during training. He pulled out a smaller notebook, with everything he could remember about the villains they encountered and the Namo. My plan is to let everything happen until the training. Then have the bus rerouted at the last second and a team of professional heroes waiting. We can't let on that anything is going wrong until the last second because one of the student's parents are being threatened and he is an unwilling traitor. How do you know all this? All Might looked scared as he asked, finally wresting his mouth free from Aizawa's capture weapon. I tried to tell you he's from the future. Duh. Kaken nudged him. Tell them the other part. The leader of the self-proclaimed League of Villains. I believe he can be saved. He was taken as a child to mold it into All for One's successor as a way to hurt All Might. We never knew for sure, but we believe that a foe gave him the destructive quirk that he wields as a means of manipulation. His original name was Tenko Shimura and his grandmother was the seventh wielder of One for All. All Might made a wounded noise and collapsed to his knees. But Izuku wasn't looking at him. So far, a lot of the plans you have from the future include to save villains. Do you really think that is the best use of your time? He felt like he was being tested, like Nezu was looking into his soul. If saving one person can save hundreds more, isn't it worth it to try? Killing one person would save those same hundreds. Again, it wasn't said cruelly. The mouse dog bear seemed to genuinely want to know his answer. It does seem to be the easier path, but we are heroes. Easy is not in our vocabulary. He looked at Katsuki with a grin on his face. Win to save. His answering grin made Izuku's heart flutter. Save to win. He didn't face All Might again until the hero training. And he hated how his teacher's face fell in disappointment when he saw his hero costume. Izuku had kept his mother's original design. He just tweaked it a bit. Now the arms and legs had reinforced compression fabric underneath. Another thing he changed was that the top layer of fabric had conductive wire running through it to gather the electricity that his quirk put off and gather it into spikes on his gloves and his boots, turning both into the equivalent of tasers. His mask was not longer just a pale imitation of a smile. It now had a full range of features including but not limited to a radio, something they had added later in his first time, a gas mask, and a filter to keep out smoke. He was also playing with the idea of making his mask even more durable, maybe including where it could form an airtight seal around his nose and mouth with a small oxygen tank. He was proud of his additions, but it was obvious that the teacher didn't approve, calling him to the side as soon as he stepped out. Young Midoriya, how can you be a proper symbol of peace if you rely on support items? The public need to see you stand. Did you ever stop to think that maybe if you had more than spandex on you would still have a stomach and both lungs? Izuku was sick of All Might's holier-than-thou attitude. You made yourself a pillar in the hero community, working yourself until you destroyed yourself. For what? You pushed Dave away. You pushed Night Eye away. Both men who were completely in love with you because the people needed a hero. Look around, All Might. Every one of us is a future hero, preparing to share the burden. You, the commission, hell, even the public put us against each other when we should be working together, making the world a better place. I followed your teaching and example. We all did, and you know where it led. We died, one by one, in a war that we had no business being in. I died, with only a little girl I failed to save for company. But before that, you died, in a hospital room after working yourself to the bone when you should have retired. All Might's funeral had thousands of people, but Toshinori's. 4. I don't need or want to be some untouchable pillar of peace. I just want to be a hero and save people. He turned around and walked back to the group to stand beside Kaken, only to realize how bad he fucked up. He forgot about Jiru, who was looking at him with a wide-eyed expression on her face. She had once told him that her hearing was sometimes a curse, especially when they moved into the dorms. He just mouthed to her that he would talk to her later, something Kaken noticed. What is that about, nerd? Izuku smiled to himself. It had taken years for the blonde to refer to him with that level of fondness in his voice before. She has very good hearing, and I was just talking to All Might about things that haven't happened yet. Katsuki nodded and All Might finished explaining the exercise. Unless I have already changed a lot, we are going to end up on opposite sides of this little game. Please don't almost kill me with your gauntlets this time. Wait, what? He looked shocked. Yeah, one explosion takes out half the building and puts me in the hospital. But don't worry, I still won. In another life he would not think to tease Katsuki like this, but fuck it. If you want to get me out of my uniform, there is better way than exploding it off. Katsuki sputtered and turned red as Izuku walked to Uraraka, All Might having just called their name. We have some time. Want to talk about strategy? This is where things would get tricky. Would Katsuki do the same thing as before? Already he had seemed to shake off the grudge he seemed to carry. Maybe he wouldn't come straight at him this time. No, he hadn't changed that much. He was probably still rearing for a fight. Izuku would not spar with him until he understood how much OFA he could use at a time, so this would be their first time facing each other. But Katsuki knew that Izuku had more training, so he wouldn't hold back. But he also knew that Izuku knew exactly what they did before, so he might deliberately do the opposite. But he also might know that Izuku would assume that was what he was going to do, so he would. Nope, he was not going to get himself stuck in a loop. Having Black Whip or Smoke Screen would be nice right now, but try as he might, he could not unlock them. Okay, here is the plan. I go inside the building and try to distract whoever is not guarding the bomb. You can use your quirk on yourself, right? He knew she could but did not want to seem creepy. She nodded. From the outside, use your quirk and as quickly and as discreetly as you can check in each window. Then I let you know when I find it and we will attack from both sides." Her smile was contagious, he thought as he smiled back. He could feel eyes on him and he discreetly looked around. All Might was staring at him with a contemplative frown. And Katsuki was staring at him too, but he didn't recognize the expression. When their turn was called and the time for the villains to secure their bomb was called, Izuku moved in. As 𝗂𝗧𝗏 went up. "Some things never change," was his thought as he heard Katsuki. "𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏, come and get me Kaken," he yelled as his quirk sparked up around him. It felt for a second like they were kids again playing tag. But this time with quirks. He tried to get around behind to wrap Kaken in the capture tape, but he was too fast, twisting his body to face him in an act of contortion that was extremely distracting for a reason he didn't want to admit. "Midoriya, I found Ida in the bomb. It's on the 3rd floor east corner, so they did not put it on the top this time. He isn't facing the window. I'm going to see if I can get in without him noticing." "Good, on my way to support." Speaking up support, his gloves probably had enough charge. When he came up with the idea, he was drawing inspiration from Kaken's gauntlets, and he thought the blonde knew that as Izuku aimed a punch at his kidney. Because his sparks were basically ambient energy, he could not charge them up to do a lot of damage like someone like Denki could do. And he honestly wondered if he should give the designs to the electric user. "You fucking copycat." Yeah, Katsuki knew he based the little tasers on his gauntlets. "Don't you know imitation is the highest form of flattery?" Izuku asked with a kick. When he got a small shock from that too, Katsuki's grin widened. "So what you are saying is you think about me?" Izuku dodged his right hook and twisted, throwing him over his shoulder, the other boy hitting the ground hard, knocking his breath out. Constantly, he tried to wrap the capture tape around one of Katsuki's wrists, but he bucked, throwing him off. "Ida caught me sneaking in. I'm cornered." Fuck, he almost forgot about her. "Why don't we see who is faster, Kaken?" he taunted. Taking off for the stairs, he heard the explosions behind him. "You have support equipment, young Bakugo. Why haven't you used it?" All Might's voice came over the speaker. Fuck, Ida and 𝗂𝗧𝗏 were only 1 floor up from them. If he set his gauntlets off now, they could get hurt. "Did you fucking lie to me about how big the explosion would be, shitty nerd?" "No, don't pull that pin." But it was like history repeating itself, but worse. "It'll be okay if you just dodge." But he was in the stairwell. There was no place to dodge to. He turned and tried to run up the stairs. But even with his quirk, it was hard to outrun a bomb. There was a blast of searing heat. Then nothing. Katsuki stared at Ida, pissed that he was still in the infirmary. When the floor collapsed from underneath him, he had sustained a few injuries. Some burns, a broken leg, but he should have been gone by now. Recovery girl had cleared him a while ago and told him to rest. When Katsuki asked him what he was still doing here, the speedster had looked at him like he was nothing as he answered, resting. He didn't want to look anywhere else, because on the other bed was Deku, laying face down, his back a mess of blisters and burns. And that was after the nurse had done her thing. Before she worked on him, he thought he saw bone. Bile raised in his throat as he thought about it. Izuku warned him. He told him the explosion was bigger than he thought it would be. But the second All Might told him to use it, he thought that Izuku was fibbing, manipulating him to win. He knew better, but in the moment that old jealousy flared up. Despite seeing All Might punch him in the face not even a week before, he thought that the hero wouldn't want Izuku to be seriously hurt. As if summoned by his thoughts, All Might walked in with a grim look on his face. "Young Bakugo, why did you tell me to do that?" He stood up and yelled at the teacher. "Why would you encourage me to use my gauntlets? You did that." Ida looked at All Might with wounded eyes. "Will you give us some privacy, young Ida?" Four Eyes was slow, but he wasn't stupid. Katsuki could tell that he knew something was off and refused to move. "Lunch is soon. The nerd is going to wake up starving. Will you get him something to eat?" Ida searched his face before nodding. He left, with a concerned glance backwards. As soon as he was gone, Katsuki turned back to All Might. "Why, young Bakugo, you have to understand. I don't have to understand shit. I wasn't going to use those gauntlets. I didn't know how strong they would be." He refused to cry, not wanting to give the bastard the satisfaction. "I know you can't understand, young Bakugo, but Midoriya had to know, had to be shown that he can't be a hero. Should not be a hero." He took a step toward the prone boy on the bed. Katsuki stepped between them. "Don't you take another fucking step. My boy, don't you see? He has to be working with All for One. He is a spy. This whole time travel excuse is just that. An excuse. You are strong and already know about what One for All. If you help me, maybe you can be my new apprentice." He's not a liar. Young Bakugo, he knows too much. Time travel isn't. You don't trust him, so you use me to try to kill him. Can't do it yourself. What the fuck is your goddamned problem? Katsuki stepped closer to him. "What kind of fucking hero are you? That is what I want to know." They both turned to look at the new person that was walking in. Aizawa was looking at them with disgust. "The only reason I am not expelling you right now is because multiple students heard All Might tell you to use those gauntlets. He wanted to be relieved, but he was just more ashamed. When Aizawa turned his eyes to the teacher, if you had reservations or concerns about Midoriya's honesty, you should have come to Nezu or me, not try to kill him. His eyes flashed red and the man deflated to his skinny form. I was not trying to kill him. The man defended himself. I was just trying to prove a point. Which was it? He's a spy, or you were trying to prove a point? Your story keeps changing. Aizawa raised an eyebrow at his sputtering denials. Do I need to remind you that there are cameras everywhere? Why were you coming in here to bother injured students? Especially since you are the reason they were injured. Probably to ask for a quirk back while I'm on pain meds. The groggy voice from behind them said. Toga tried that one time, but the danger sense was working then. I missed that quirk. It was mumbled, and Izuku was having trouble turning his head to look at them. See, he is talking about having multiple quirks. That is something only All for One can do. For the safety of this school, he must be forced to give my quirk to someone else and leave the school. Katsuki could not believe the man was able to say that with a straight face. The only one who needs to be forced from this school is you, 𝗧𝗪𝗍. He snarled. You are going to get someone killed. I agree, Aizawa said with a nod. There was a pained mumble from where Izuku lay, but it seemed to be an agreement. I think you need to go talk to Nezu about your future here. It was a dismissal and All Might knew it. Puffing back up to his big form, he left. Katsuki turned his attention back to Izuku. 4 Eyes is bringing you food, but is there anything I can help you with now? Izuku weakly gestured for Katsuki to come closer, and he did. His hand flopped and the blonde took it. Come closer. He did not have any choice but to obey, leaning down. I told you so. His eyes fluttered closed and he fell asleep without letting go. Katsuki huffed, pulling up a chair. He sat there holding Izuku's hand until the alarm blared, signaling a lockdown. He could feel eyes on him as he opened his own. What's the damage? He asked Nezu, who was staring at him. Surprisingly, no broken bones. But you will have some scars on your back. A few more sessions with Recovery Girl and you should be just fine. At one time he had thought Nezu's black eyes were unnerving, but no, he could see the concern shining through. All Might has been removed from campus, but he is still convinced that you are a spy. No, he isn't. This is just about me not being his perfect little acolyte and following his plans. If he was truly scared I was a risk, he would have set up a meeting with Tsukachi. He sighed and pushed himself up. He had really hoped to not get so many scars this time. The new skin on his back pulled and itched. Where is Kaken? Mr. Bakugo has been sent home until his fate could be decided. That was new. Last time it was his decision and he hadn't faced any consequences. It wasn't his fault. All Might told him to do it. He wasn't going to use them until All Might pretty much commanded him. I thought you would say that. I informed his parents that his break from classes was due to us being afraid he was traumatized from the accident. I will inform him he can return tomorrow. Izuku smiled at him. He had hinted that the Baku parents were too hard on Katsuki. He was glad that Nezu had picked up on it. One of your other projects has also borne fruit. The villain known as 𝗬𝗿 has been taken into custody and is being held for us to question. That is good. It does mean that Shoto needs to be brought in sooner than I thought. I also need to talk to Jiru, and I can go ahead and tell 𝗳𝗍 what he needs to keep his brother safe. I have a notebook. Why was time travel so freaking hard? I can arrange for you to have an empty room tomorrow for privacy, if you feel up to it. Izuku nodded and got dressed, his new scars pulling uncomfortably again. It must have been shown on his face because Nezu held out a jar. Recovery Girl said this should help. Thanks. Someone, probably Katsuki, had gathered his stuff and left it for him. Shooting off a text to his mother, he headed to the Bakugo's. Auntie Mitsuki answered, pulling him into a hug. Izu, I heard there was an accident at school today. Yes, ma'am. I came to check on Kaken and maybe have a sleepover if you don't mind. He gave his best puppy dog eyes. Of course. The brat is in his room. He thanked her and headed to his room, letting himself in. What are you? Izuku pushed the books off his lap and handed him the jar Nezu gave him. What are you? Izuku stripped his shirt off and flopped face down over his lap. Cream, please. The blonde was frozen for several seconds. Kaken, it itches. He wasn't too ashamed to put a bit of a whine in his voice. Katsuki let out a sigh and began to rub the cream into his skin. Will you help me explain the whole time travel thing to a few people tomorrow? Yeah, whatever you need. Izuku made himself comfortable laying across Kaken's lap as he rubbed the ointment in, even using his quirk to heat up his hands and ease the glide. He fell asleep like that, still tired from Recovery Girl's quirk. He woke up, however, in Katsuki's bed tucked in. Biting back a squeal, he took a deep breath of the scent that permeated the bed. To him, Katsuki always kind of smelled like this caramelized banana dessert his mother used to make. The hag says, come eat. I'm not going to serve you like a princess after you stole my bed, you lazy ass, Katsuki announced as he slammed the door open. Princess, huh? I can be your princess. Is that what you called me when you tucked me in? He had never seen the other boy go so red. Teasing him was so fun. So what did Auntie make for breakfast? He hopped up with a grin and brushed past him. Breakfast was quiet, until Auntie started in on Katsuki. You came in second for the entrance exam. You know that is not good enough. Look at Izuku, he's a late bloomer and he did amazing, and why do you always have to be so hard on him? He's perfect the way he is, and all your nagging is doing is putting unnecessary pressure on him. She looked at him with shock, her mouth agape, before composing herself. Well, Izu, pressure makes diamonds, she said as she took a bite. It also cracks Auntie. I have never seen anyone work as hard, or try so hard, so why are you so hard on him? Her mouth opened and closed repeatedly as if she was trying to speak, but couldn't. He's a good boy, Auntie, the best. And he is going to grow up to be an amazing hero, an even better man. The thing is, if you don't learn to stop and appreciate the son you have, you will never know the man he becomes. He stood up and bowed. Thank you for the meal. He could feel Katsuki's eyes on him, but the blonde didn't say anything. Not as they got dressed. And not as they left for school. It wasn't until the gate that Katsuki's hand shot out and grabbed him. Why did you say all that? He asked. Because it's true. But everything I did, you're back. It was like he couldn't choose what to say. You have grown up so much, you are not that bully anymore. And I don't blame you for my back. You were manipulated by a teacher, someone you were supposed to trust. I don't blame you. Izuku gave him a smile. Don't worry about it. He started to move away, but Katsuki tugged him back. In the future, are we? He trailed off and Izuku was confused. Friends, he continued. The green-haired boy felt disappointed. Yeah, Kaken, we are the best of friends. They walked in together side by side just like Izuku always wanted. But now he wanted something more. Something he was not sure he would ever get. As he walked in, his friends all rushed to check on him. This really isn't necessary, he said, trying to duck behind Katsuki to hide. The blonde scoffed and pushed him forward. Bro, how are you? I would have been so messed up if someone did that to me, Kirishima said. You can be honest if you are not okay. Katsuki looked around as if in shock that he was talking to him. I'm not the one who got hurt. Jiru heard All Might tell you to use your gauntlets. That's messed up, Ashido said, hanging off Kirishima's arm. You trust someone to keep us safe and he sets you up. Enough chatter. It's time to go. Aizawa barked. Go? Go where? Kaminari asked. On a field trip. Get dressed in your hero costumes and meet me outside on the bus. Bakugo, leave the gauntlets here. They went to comply. And Izuku could tell that Katsuki was still bothered as they got dressed. Hey, do you want me to help you redesign your gauntlets so you can control the size of the explosion? We can do that. Yeah, it shouldn't be too hard to make some kind of nozzle system that controls how big it is. You don't have to get rid of them altogether. I know how much that design meant to you. Izuku smiled reassuringly. Those gauntlets were something that Katsuki had in mind since he was a child. They used to draw what their hero costumes would be when they were 4 and life was simpler and kinder. His always looked more like something that you would get from an All Might costume shop. But Katsuki's always had the grenade gauntlets. Izuku refused to let him get rid of them because of guilt. As they got to the bus, Ada was trying to wrangle the students. Ada, buddy, wrong type of bus. Just calm down and let everyone sit where they want. They took their seats and started on the journey. He bit back a smile as the familiar conversation started. He was quick to reassure Kirishima his quirk was flashy enough and manly. Katsuki was sitting close enough to him that he felt him stiffen up when Kaminari called his personality a heaping pile of garbage. How about you look at yourself before judging other people, Kaminari? Izuku had never really forgiven the electric blonde for his friendship with Minta. Kaminari had stood by the little perv even through all the allegations. Hopefully with Minta gone, Kaminari could be who he was always meant to be. Izuku always had the theory that he was gay, if at least bisexual, but his friendship with the homophobic Minta had kept him trapped in the closet. Okay, listen up. Aizawa called from the front. He took a box and walked down the middle of the bus. I need all cell phones, smart watches, radios, anything that can communicate with the outside world in this box. Yes, Kaminari, that means your radio too. Everyone looked around nervously as he collected everything. Where are we going? Aoyama asked nervously. A training facility. Aizawa responded sharply. He kept touching his ear, and if Izuku looked hard he could make out the earpiece. Izuku was watching out the window and he realized they were really heading to the USJ. He looked at Aizawa concerned and he made a hand signal to him. It was something that the teacher would teach them much later, his own short-form sign language that he used on missions. The signal he used was for being tracked. Taking out his notebook, he relayed the info to Katsuki, who immediately became more alert. They pulled up to 𝗧𝗏 and everyone started freaking out looking at it. Everyone stay seated and don't move, Aizawa said with a glare. He took the box of electronics and took it inside, stopping only to whisper something to the driver. Izuku activated his quirk and followed behind. He was too fast for the driver to stop, but he was able to block the rest of the students from following. What are you doing? You know what happens here. Why are you going inside? We think they are tracking the phone. I need to trick them into thinking that everything is okay. Go back to the bus. There are dozens of pros waiting for them, Aizawa said. Technically, I already have a hero license. I can help. I know, kid. That's why I left you on the bus, in case someone gets out. He knew it was manipulation, but Aizawa's words got to him. He headed back to the bus where Katsuki was still screaming, trying to get out. What the fuck is going on? He yelled. Stay alert, keep people calm. He went back inside and sat down. Aizawa will be right back. Everyone sit down. But what's happening? What's going on? Are we not training? Is he coming back? He couldn't tell who was talking. Everyone was talking over each other. Everyone shut up. He took a breath. Panicking is not going to do anything. They sat quietly until there was a crash and everyone ran to the window looking up. Something huge crashed through the roof of the 𝐒𝐻 only to crash back down seconds later. I hear sirens, Jiro said. Sure enough, the parking lot was filled with police vans and buses and ambulances. Izuku didn't think. He took a breath until Aizawa made his way out of the chaos with a hard look on his face. The only injury he had was a cut on his face, right below his eye. I thought I told you if I wasn't out in 5 minutes to get the kids back to campus, they would have had a riot. The driver shrugged. He put the bus in drive and began to move. Aizawa made his way to Aoyama. Kneeling, he spoke softly to the boy and he began sobbing. Not in a way that meant he was scared or sad, but huge cathartic sobs of relief. He threw his arms around Aizawa, who looked very uncomfortable as he patted him on the back. When the bus got back to school, Aoyama was taken away, but he had a smile, so Izuku guessed they must have been able to get his parents to safety. They changed out of their costumes and Aizawa pulled him aside. You ready for the meeting, kid? They want to see if Shoto can get through to 𝗳𝗲𝗺. No luck trying to get him to open up. He knew it would be difficult. From what Shoto and him pieced together in the future, 𝗳𝗲𝗺 had been on his own since he was 13. He's stonewalling. Even bringing up his father did nothing. He stopped responding altogether. Aizawa sighed. I'll get the students you requested. Izuku got Katsuki's attention and they went to the empty room, the blonde sitting down with his arms crossed while Izuku paced nervously. Calm down, nerd, Katsuki said. You're making me dizzy. Before he could think of a retort, the door opened and Aizawa led the requested students in. He sat beside Katsuki on the desk, mirroring his posture. The rest sat at the desks in the front of the room. Now that they were in front of him, he didn't know what to say. I don't know where to start. How about you are from the future where we are all dead? Jiro said helpfully. That even got Shoto to react, and he was still firmly in his Ice Prince phase. Yes, thank you. For what felt like the 100th time he told his story. At the end, Ida raised his hand. This isn't class. You don't have to raise your hand. He heard Katsuki scoff behind him but chose to ignore it. Why are you telling us? Why not the whole class? Isn't it dangerous to give out future information? Why haven't you notified the Hero Commission? We are only telling people as necessary, except Jiro. She just has really good hearing. Izuku said as he rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. And you see us as necessary. It wasn't a question. Shoto was making a statement in his usual deadpan. Yes. He turned to get his bag, but Katsuki already had it in his hand, pulling out the small notebook that he had written everything about Stain in. If I hadn't already changed something, your brother is going to come across Stain on the day of the sports festival. He survives, but is permanently paralyzed. This is everything I know about his quirk in fighting him. He held out the notebook for Ida to take, but he just sat there gaping at him. If he doesn't want to save his brother, fuck him, Katsuki said. At that, Ida snatched the book. May I tell my parents and brother what you have said? He asked as he stood. Ida was shaking and Izuku gave him a small smile. If they have questions, they can come to me. I'm not keeping this a secret, but discretion may be needed. I would like to keep the circle of people in the know as small as possible because I am still not sure how it happened. I know it was a quirk, but I will. He gave a stiff bow. I must talk to my brother. You are excused for the rest of the day, Ida, Aizawa said with a wave of his hand. Why am I here? Shoto asked after he left. Jiro, would you mind? Izuku nodded to the door. This is a privacy convo. I got it. Thanks for looping me in. She got up and left. Aizawa is going to open an investigation against your father for child abuse and pretty much anything else we can pin on him. Abuse of power, position, keeping your mom locked up. Fuck if he ever has jaywalked, we are going to find out and press charges. The look on his face was something he had never seen before. The thing is, one of the witnesses isn't talking, and we need you to talk to him. Try to get him to open up. Why me? In the future, me and you would spend hours going through old cases, creating a timeline, trying to figure out when he crossed the line. Izuku huffed out a little laugh. If future you knew that we would actually have a chance to save him, you would. Well, you would probably create some sort of conspiracy theory about Iri's child from the future coming back to send me to the past. At the mention of Iri, his heart panged. He needed to meet with Nezu and see where they were getting her out. Who is the witness? Shoto was stone-faced except for the eyes. That is where Shoto was never able to hide. The rest of his face would look like marble, but if you looked in his eyes, you would know. You know, Shoto. You always thought that he was alive, but no one listened. You told me all the theories you had how he could have survived with leaving his jawbone behind. Tears were filling up his eyes, clinging to his lashes. He's really... The tears fell and Shoto stood up, throwing the desk to the side. No. If he was alive, Shoto was shaking, and he held his trembling hand out to keep Izuku back as he stepped forward. If he was alive, he would have come back. He wouldn't leave 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝗻 or Natsuo. He loved them. A sob tore from his throat. I'm the one he hated. He didn't even go to see her. He stayed away and it's all my fault. Shoto, Izuku hadn't planned this. Shoto was having a full mental breakdown, flames crawling up the left side of his body. Aizawa activated his quirk, shutting the flames down. To his surprise, Katsuki was the one who stood up and approached him, taking his arms into his hands and shaking him. Stop. Your bastard brother's choices are not your fault. Take a deep breath and pull your shit together. You have a chance to get answers, but not if you can't stay the fuck calm. The blonde let out an oomph as Shoto lunged at him, wrapping his arms around him and burying his face into Katsuki's neck as he sobbed. Him looking at Izuku and mouthing "help me" would have been hilarious if the whole scene wasn't screwed up. Maybe he made a mistake. It took Shoto way longer than he would like to admit for him to pull himself together. He admitted to Aizawa that he didn't know much about Tauya. He had disappeared when Shoto was only 5. But he did feel the absence deeply. Every time that 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝗻 would cry in front of Tauya's altar, he felt it. Every time during training when Endeavor would tell him that he wished Tauya had not been defective so Shoto wouldn't have even been born. Honestly, sometimes he agreed with that. Every time Natsuo glared through him, he felt it. He may have the perfect quirk his father wanted, but he had never felt more like a reject. It was his fault Tauya died. It was his fault his mother left. Everything went wrong the second he was born. You know none of that is true, right? Izuku was beside him, rubbing his back. It felt nice. You were a child. Nothing was your fault. But listen to the nerd icy hot. He's the smartest one in this damn place. Izuku smiled at Bakugo and Shoto wondered what the feeling in his stomach was. He had never felt it before, but he knew that he wanted Midoriya to smile at him like that. Thanks, Kaken. He took a piece of paper and wrote something down. Listen, I'm going to let you talk to Aizawa, but here is my number and address. If you need to get away at any time for any reason, come over. We can have a sleepover, even tonight. Kaken is spending the night too and we can just chill. Who said I'm spending the night at your shitty apartment? My mom is making spicy mapo tofu. I'm spending the night at your shitty apartment. Something about the way they bantered made him want. Ignore him, my apartment is awesome. Come over whenever, at any time. Izuku gave him a smile and a clap on the shoulder. Come on, Kaken. He watched them leave, walking side by side, Bakugo bumping Midoriya's shoulder with his own, and he wondered what it would be like to walk between them. Would they give him the same kind of free touch they gave each other? Then it was just him and the teacher. Talk, Todoroki. No matter what you say, I will believe you. So he did, starting from when his quirk manifested and his father began his training, to Tauya's death, to his mother's breakdown and hospitalization. He told him about the contempt he felt from his siblings, and how Natsuo had tried to complain after he fell from a tree and broke his arm, but Endeavor didn't care. He had walked around with a broken arm for 3 days until a concerned teacher took him to the hospital and reported the incident to Child Safety Services. The only thing that had happened was the teacher had been fired 2 days later. He had also ignored 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝗻 when she had stomach problems, neglecting her to the point that Natsuo had carried her on his back to the doctor. She had been so stressed trying to keep up with school and all the household chores and cooking Endeavor had placed on her she had ruptured an ulcer. The more he talked, the darker Aizawa's face became. When he was done, he felt like there had been a weight taken off his shoulders. I believe I am ready to talk to Tauya now. He was scared that he was going to be taken to Tartarus, but to his pleasant surprise he was taken to a normal precinct. Aizawa led him to an interrogation room where there was a dark-haired man covered in burn scars. Tauya. Even to himself his voice sounded small. Well, if it isn't Endeavor's masterpiece. Here to gloat, Shoto. You really are alive. For the second time he felt his eyes fill up with tears. Tauya's hands were shackled in front of him with a quirk suppressant bracelet on each wrist. Have they had a doctor come look at you? Are you okay? Don't pretend you care, daddy's boy. Tauya was twisting his wrists in the restraints, and Shoto didn't know if it was from anxiety or if they were too tight. Can we loosen his cuffs? He asked the policeman standing to the side. No. So why hasn't Daddy Dearest come to put his failed experiment out of his misery? I believe Aizawa is keeping you a secret until the investigation is complete. He sat down and reached for the restrained hands, but the villain jerked them away, making sure the reject gets locked away forever. He spat, making sure Endeavor can never hurt you again. Or the others, trying to give you and 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝗻 and Natsuo freedom from his bullshit. I want to get our mother out of the hospital he locked her in, and I need your help. Bullshit. You are his golden child, the one he tossed us aside for. Tauya scoffed at him. Do you really think I wanted that? That I wanted to start training at 5? That I wanted to be treated like a weapon and not a human being? He was trying to keep calm, but he could feel the panic clawing at his throat. You wanted to be a hero. Tauya glared at him. Those teal eyes so cold and just like his father's. I wanted a brother. I wanted family. I wanted to be fucking loved. He stood the chair clattering behind him. Fuck you. Fucking 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗟. For someone who hates him, you are just fucking like him. Slamming his hands down on the table, 𝗬𝗏 also stood. Don't you dare fucking say that. Then don't fucking act like him. Neither of them bothered to look at the officer who had his taser in his hand. He just took a breath trying to compose himself. Fine. You hate me, that is nothing new. But help Mom and our siblings. Go to hell. I live there, with him. You left us there. He walked out, giving in to the childish impulse to slam the door. Aizawa was waiting, and when he offered to drive Shoto home, he found himself giving the address on the piece of paper that felt almost heavy in his pocket. Standing in front of the door gave him pause. And he almost changed his mind, but he steeled his nerves and knocked. A kind-looking woman opened the door, and for the first time in years he was swept into a mother's arms. You poor dear, 𝐬𝐴 said you might come for a sleepover. You go sit with the boys and I will fix you a plate. She led him to her living room where Midoriya and 𝗵𝘃𝗲 were arguing over some hero documentary. How about I grab you some sleep clothes and I can wash your uniform for you, sweetie? He realized that he had imposed on the poor woman without even bringing some fresh clothes. She must think him uncouth. Thanks, Mom. I'll get him some food. Midoriya stood and walked away while Mrs. Midoriya grabbed him something to wear and took him to the bathroom. He changed and handed her his uniform and went back into the living room. Both of the other boys had already changed into pajamas too, and Midoriya was holding a bowl full of the most delicious thing he had ever smelled. The movie on the screen had changed. It was paused on some sort of logo of a castle. I hope you don't mind. Older you always watched this movie when he was upset. It was his favorite after we had a Disney marathon one day. He pushed him down beside 𝗵𝘃𝗲 and sat on the other side of him. He could feel the warmth from both of them and the heat from the bowl that was pressed into his hands. It was grounding. Then Izuku hit play and snowflakes materialized on the screen. It was the safest he had felt ever. When Shoto woke up the next day, it was at the normal time he usually did. His body told him it was time to get up and train, but when he opened his eyes and saw Midoriya's face calm and lax in sleep, he wanted to sleep more too. He just wasn't sure if his body would let him. Not wanting to disturb the boys on either side of him, he rolled over to get more comfortable. As soon as he was on his back, Izuku snuggled up to his left side like a heat-seeking missile. The green-haired boy's arm snaked over his waist, and he had never thought of his left side in that way before, that it could give warmth and comfort. He was so entranced by Izuku it startled him when 𝗵𝘃𝗲 threw his own arm over him, pressing his against Midoriya. The blonde had a slight sheen of sweat on his forehead, and sighed in relief as he pressed it into Shoto's shoulder. It made sense that he would run hot, and he put just a little more cold into his right side content to act as an ice pack. He didn't know how long he laid there, stiff and uncomfortable, but unwilling to move. He did notice when the door creaked open and Mrs. Midoriya crept inside. "What are you doing?" he whispered. Thankfully, he didn't startle her. She was looking at them with a fond smile, so she knew he was awake. "I just got notice from you guys' school. Classes are canceled for the day, so I was just going to turn the alarm off so you can sleep in." "Class canceled," Izuku mumbled while stretching. "Yeah, baby. You boys can sleep in. Although poor Shoto might want to get up, you two seem to have him trapped." She giggled as Izuku opened his eyes and realized the position he was in. Blushing, he scooted over, giving him room to get up. 𝗵𝘃𝗲 grumbled as he took his arm away, but he was able to get up and head to the bathroom, taking care of the urgent pressure in his bladder. He looked back into the room where the other two boys had met in the middle, as though they were caught in each other's gravity. Even if he wanted to get back in the bed, there was no longer room for him. His gut twisted painfully at the thought. Moving toward the kitchen, he saw her whipping up enough food to feed an army. "Would you like some help?" he asked. He didn't know what he could do, but he wanted to make himself useful. She smiled at him and gestured to tofu. "You can cut that up. I'm also going to make some miso soup." They worked side by side for a while until there was a knock at the door. She left him to answer it, and came back with a strained smile on her face, followed by someone who looked like a female version of 𝗵𝘃𝗲. Maybe he wasn't human. He could be a genetically altered clone. "I brought a week's worth of clothes. I don't know how long you plan to keep my brat from me." She huffed. She even sounded like him. "I'm not kidnapping him. I just think you can use a break from each other. You are so hard on him and he's such a good boy." She turned and smiled at Shoto and his uneven cuts of tofu. "That is perfect, honey. Do you want to chop some green onion for me too? Is this another child you are trying to protect from their rightful parents?" He made a show of checking the clock, then he turned to the woman, keeping all emotion from his face. "If I were home right now, father would most likely be punching me in the face and calling it training. I prefer it here." The 𝗵𝘃𝗲 lady looked like she had bit into a lemon. "I don't do that. Like my father always said, a little pressure makes diamonds, and bread only rises when you let it rest." Mrs. Midoriya responded. "Mitsuki, I love you. You are my best friend. And I promised when your son was born to protect him from anything that will harm him." Even you, she sighed. Take some time. When is the last time you and Masaru had some time away? Your son isn't the only one you put too much pressure on. You need to take a rest too. Your fashion empire can last a week without you. The blonde took a breath, then finally put down the bag she had been carrying. Maybe you are right. Izuku said some things that really made me think. And maybe I do need a break. Masaru has been talking for years about finally taking the honeymoon you guys never got. If you keep putting it off, it will never happen. Fine, you win. If you get sick of my kid, just kick him out. He can take care of himself for a week or two. They hugged, and Shoto was jealous. Mrs. Midoriya gave the best hugs. As if she could hear his thoughts after Mitsuki left, she came to get the green onions he had sliced. Again, they were uneven and kind of horrible, but she told him how good he did and wrapped her arms around him. He could really get used to being hugged. Katsuki woke up sweaty. While he needed the heat to use his quirk. When it was hot when he tried to sleep, he was miserable. The doctor said it was something about his quirk in his heart. The nitroglycerin in his sweat made his heart all wonky. As Mom said, he needed to get over it. That he needed to overcome his limitations and would set the heater to hot enough that he could never get a truly good sleep. But for the first time in forever, he felt fully rested. Hey, nerdass, where did half and half go? I think he's with Mom. Izuku stretched. I smell food. Then get up and let's eat. He pushed him, slow enough that Izuku could have stopped him, but the green-haired boy let him push him off the bed with a laugh. They got up and walked to the kitchen, where Todoroki was helping Auntie put food out. Mom, everything looks so good. Thank you, sweetie, Shoto helped. She turned to Katsuki. Your mom dropped some clothes off for you, honey. She said you can stay for the week, but you can stay for as long as you want. Is Icy Hot staying too? As long as he wants. Good. At Shoto's confused look, he smiled. That was the best sleep I've gotten in forever, and something tells me it was for you too. What are you suggesting? He asked with a clueless head tilt. Either way, it's going to be snug here for a bit. I'm just glad you are sharing well. 𝐭𝐽 urged the boys to sit, giving each of them a kiss on the forehead. At Todoroki's startled expression, she smiled and pressed another one to his crown. What are the plans today? Izuku sighed. Well, school is cancelled, so it might be the best time to talk to Nezu. Katsuki wondered if it was more future business. I'll go with you. For a second, he thought the green-haired boy was going to argue, but he just flashed him a grateful smile. What about Shoto? Your teacher asked me to keep him inside today. Something about an investigation. She gave him a sad smile. It will probably be far more boring than you are used to, but we can watch some movies, maybe bake some cookies. That sounds really nice. Something about the expression on Todoroki's face made his stomach twist. He looked lost. Can we watch Frozen again? Yes, sweetie. Katsuki loved his mother, despite everything. But sometimes he really wished she was more like Auntie 𝗏𝗏. That woman had so much love. He was ashamed to admit that some of how he treated Deku when they were kids was due to jealousy. He had a better quirk, a brighter future, but Izuku always tested well. Izuku never had to earn his mother's love. It was freely given. Izuku's mom never made him feel like he was never enough. Suddenly he wasn't that hungry. I'm going to take a shower and get dressed, then we can leave. He took his bag and went to the bathroom, hopping in the shower. When he opened the bag, his eyes burned. Sitting on top of his neatly folded clothes, there was a note. Just 2 words. I'm sorry. Grabbing the note, he tightened his hand around it, crumbling it. Taking a deep breath, he let it out slowly before smoothing the note out and putting it back in his bag. It might be the only time he ever gets an apology from his mom, and he didn't want to trash it. When he was done getting dressed, he met Izuku at the door. Ready, Kaken? Thankfully, Izuku seemed to understand that he had something on his mind, and they walked in companionable silence for a while until he felt his stomach growl. Izuku knocked his shoulder with his own to get his attention. And as soon as he looked, Izuku reached in his bag and handed him some packed onigiri. I saw you didn't eat breakfast this morning. A blush dusted his face, and Katsuki felt the smile spread across his face. Best of friends, his ass. He felt a lightness in his chest and in his step. They got to you and let themselves in. At Nezu's office, the door swung open by itself. That is creepy, he said. Izuku just flashed him a smile. Good morning, Nezu, Izuku said as he walked in. Have you made any progress with Eri? The 8 precepts. He looked so hopeful. Katsuki reached out and took his hand. There has been a snag. Sir Night-Eye is not willing to share his investigation. That is bullshit. A little girl is being tortured and he's playing politics. Izuku was distraught, and Katsuki squeezed his hand. He squeezed back and calmed his tone. Did you explain to him? I did. You said she survived before. She will survive now. Nezu's black eyes bore into theirs. On another note, the teachers have agreed that since technically you have already graduated, if you are willing to take a series of cumulative tests, if you need to take some time off, we will allow it. I understand. Izuku nodded, but Katsuki could tell he was upset. They walked out together, and the green-haired boy turned to him. I think I need some time alone. Can you go tell my mom so she won't worry? Sure, anything you need. He made his way to the small apartment that had begun to feel much more like home than any place he had ever been. He told 𝐭 and Shoto what 𝗧𝗑 had said and they spent the day together. But as it got later and later, 𝗧𝗂𝐁 got worried. They called his phone and it went straight to voicemail. All three of them went to bed that night with heavy hearts. As Shoto and 𝗧𝗂𝐁 laid in 𝗧𝗑's bed that night listening to 𝗭 cry in the next room, they held onto each other, also holding onto the thought that 𝗧𝗑 knew what he was doing, that he would be okay. He had to be. Nezu probably had more faith in him than he deserved. He honestly meant to just go clear his head. But he found himself running across the rooftops towards the area that 8 precepts held. When he was on his little jaunt as a vigilante, there was a spot on the roof near their territory where he would sleep. Someone kept pigeons up there, and the coop they were kept in was kept clean and warm. As long as he was gone when the sun rose, it was always a safe spot to hunker down in. That's where he was hiding as he tried to think of a plan. He knew that sometimes the babysitters would take her for walks, but he couldn't remember any specific dates, except the day Mirio and him met her for the first time. What he did know was some of the routes they took. He spent 48 hours watching the alley where he knew they would come when his phone beeped. Thankfully, he had been able to keep it charged, because it was a message from a private number. I expected a little more planning from you, 𝗧𝗑, but I do understand desperation. And there was just an address. Fuck. Did he leave now and risk missing them? Or did he go and potentially get something to help him? This whole setup just screamed Nezu, so he was going to risk it, but quickly. Police patrols had increased, more than likely looking for him, but they were not hard to avoid. He followed the GPS to the park the address was to, and under a bench was a black duffel. Grabbing it, he went back to his rooftop to go through it. There was a fake ID for him, some clothes, temporary spray hair dye, and a black credit card with the alias from his fake ID on it. At least he could eat and get a place to get a shower before he found a place to hide her. He had a plan for that. After another day of not seeing her, he got some supplies with the card that was provided and some dinner, even a hotel for the night to shower and change his clothes. It could be a while. Meanwhile, when I find that asshole, I'm going to murder him. 𝗧𝗂𝐁 was pacing back and forth in the living room. It had been days and he could not believe that no one could find him. 𝗭 was distraught. She had even gone to Nezu for help, believing that 𝗧𝗑 was starving to death on the streets. Shoto was just as fucked, but for a different reason. His brother Natsu and his sister had contacted him. 𝗵 had been taken in for questioning about Taoya. He hadn't heard the conversation, but Shoto had all but shut down afterward. Both him and 𝗭 were on the couch watching Frozen for what he would swear was the 100th time. Growling, he went to make dinner. Someone had to take care of everyone, and he was going to do it. He was halfway done when there was a knock at the door. He turned the burner off and went to make sure everything was okay. 𝗭 opened the door and there stood 𝗵 in civilian clothes, looking like he hadn't slept in days. She didn't even get a chance to greet him when he pushed his way inside. "Shoto, please go away." That gave the hero pause. He seemed confused to why Shoto looked so broken. "Your mother has been released from the hospital." 𝗵 wiped a hand down his face. "She's filing for divorce and asked me to vacate the house." "What does that have to do with me?" He finally paused the movie and looked at his father. "I'm moving out. I got an apartment. I know I fucked up." "Taoya," his voice broke on the name. "I heard him. Only him." Shoto's face hardened and he stood up. 𝗧𝗂𝐁 moving to stand between them, ready to stop him from attack his father. "No, you weren't answering my calls, so I just wanted to let you know it was safe to go home." Shoto let out a bitter laugh. "I have already been made aware of you moving out. I was told under no uncertain terms that I would not be welcome, and I would rather be homeless than go with you. That will not happen. You are welcome here for as long as you want." 𝗭 said. Turning to 𝗵, she continued, "You, however, are not. You expect to take care of my masterpiece in this hovel." He had been holding in his temper for as long as he could. "You fucking bastard. He's not a masterpiece, he's a fucking person. You drove one son to destroying himself and you were well on the way to doing it again. In hovel, this place may be small, but it is filled with more love and kindness and family than you will ever know, and if you insult either of them again I will explode your teeth out of your ass." "𝗧𝗂𝐁," 𝗭 said, sounding scandalized, but he could tell from her watery eyes that she was touched. 𝗵 opened his mouth to speak but then looked behind 𝗧𝗂𝐁. Something in his gaze softened and 𝗧𝗂𝐁 turned. Shoto had never gone back to get any clothes. So he had been wearing his uniform, 𝗧𝗂𝐁's clothes, or the few things Hisashi had left when he moved out. Right now he was wearing Hisashi's old pajamas. They dwarfed him, hanging off his shoulder and baggy on his hips. He was also clutching one of Izuku's gang orca plushies, and it looked like 𝗵 finally saw him as a child, and not a weapon to be wielded. Sighing, he turned to 𝗭. "He needs clothes. If they will not let him come get his stuff, you need to make them. Give me your bank code." "I don't need. You can't raise a child on love alone. Just like I couldn't raise children on money alone." She showed him something on her phone and used his to send her something. "If you need anything else, contact me." He looked at Shoto. He swallowed hard. "Goodbye, son." 𝗭 sat down and pulled Shoto to her side. "I'm going to finish cooking dinner." He stomped into the kitchen. The second he got his hands on Deku, he was going to kill him. How dare he leave him to deal with all this emotional shit? If he was back at school, he would be getting ready for the sports festival. He had been out here for over a week, only leaving when he had to, taking showers only when he had to at a love hotel that he could rent by the hour. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe they haven't started taking those walks yet. Maybe he should just risking taking on the 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗧𝗂𝐵 full frontal alone. Maybe he should pay attention because there was a rerunning now. Shit, this must be the first time she tried to run away. He had to move fast before her babysitter found her. He scaled the fire escape to the ground. She saw him and her eyes went wide with fear. "Please, I just want to help you," he asked, holding out his arms. Still, she hesitated, and he could hear the pounding of heavy footfalls coming closer. "Eri, you little bitch," she gasped and threw herself into his arms and activated his quirk, running up the fire escape as quickly as he could. He knew he had to have been seen, because the person was loudly coming up themselves. Without slowing down, he grabbed the duffel bag and jumped from roof to roof, staying ahead of his pursuer. Eri was crying, burying her face into his neck, and he racked his brain. He couldn't go home. If they had access to the CCTV network, they could track him, and he would put his mother and 𝐻𝐭𝐴 at risk. Same for any hotels. He wasn't dumb. He knew that they had all sorts of side businesses, and any hotel owner might report to the leader. He needed somewhere safe that didn't have any cameras. "Hold on, I have an idea," he told her, wrapping her tightly in his arms. There were woods near his apartment complex, where him and 𝐻𝐭𝐴 used to play. He hadn't been to their old clubhouse they built since he came back in time, but before, he used to visit it once a week to make sure it was in decent repair, like a shrine to their lost friendship. His dad and Masaru helped them build it when they were only babies. It was near a small lake that they had fished in. "Please," he thought, "I know I can't handle one for all at enough, but if there was any time for someone to help me know would be great. I could really use smokescreen." There was a loud noise, and he realized he was being shot at as pain shot through his leg, and he screamed. These were not the quirk erasing bullets, they were real. Stumbling, he twisted so he landed on his back, protecting Eri from the brunt of the fall. It wasn't the first time he had been shot, but it still hurt like a bitch. She screamed and tried to push away from him as the 8 Precepts member moved closer. Her horn was glowing and the pain in his leg was fading. Well, he knew how to take care of that problem. He blasted the man back with his fingers, doing an air blast, breaking as many as he could at the same time. The man hit the wall and fell, unconscious. He started to run again, breaking his hand and fingers over and over again until they reached the woods. He had always wondered if this would work, as he went to an old rotted tree that he used to climb before it died. Pressing her hands against it, he backed off as far as he dared, keeping her in sight, and watched as the rot receded, giving way to new growth and life. By the time her quirk had exhausted, the tree, which had to have been hundreds of years old, was a young, strong tree. She was sobbing and he moved up behind her. "Wow, that took a lot of power. Are you okay?" She turned, her red eyes wide with shock. Her mouth opened to speak, but nothing came out. Moving fast, he reached out, catching her as her eyes rolled back into her head and she fell. He felt her forehead. No sign of a fever, so probably just quirk exhaustion. He would let her rest. Checking his quirk, he made sure he still had it. He didn't seem to lose any time. In fact, he felt better than he had in weeks. Even the persistent itch and pull of his scars were gone. He set her down in the little clubhouse, using his duffel as a pillow for her, and reached back to feel the skin on his back. All the scars were gone. The next day, the sports festival was tomorrow, but the nerd still wasn't back yet. His mother was, and they had sat down to have a talk. The honeymoon had done wonders for her, and Masaru had talked her into starting therapy. For the first time, she asked him what he wanted, and he told her that he wanted to stay with Auntie, that some things were going on, and she and Deku needed him. He won't lie, he was a little hurt when his mother seemed relieved, but he brushed it off. He had been working with Shoto and had even gotten him to use his fire a little bit. While him and Izuku's notebooks, Izuku had taken to writing little notes on creative ways that they had all used their quirks to save people in the future and ways to improve. So Mitsuki said as long as he seemed to keep his grades and his training up, he was welcome to stay with 𝐴𝐴𝐼𝐼. She even added some money to the 30 million yen Endeavor had sent, so 𝐴𝐴𝐼𝐼 was in the process of buying a bigger apartment in the building. It was on the top floor and had 4 bedrooms, although he didn't have the heart to tell her that at least one of the bedrooms was a waste. He had found the secret to finally sleeping well, and he wasn't letting it go until he absolutely had to. Plus, since she owned the apartment that they were currently in, she could sell it and get some of her money back. But Izuku's dumbass needed to come home. The only reason he hadn't got to drag the asshole home himself is because Nezu assured him that he had a trace on him. As if summoned by his thoughts, his phone beeped with a message from the rat. His phone is destroyed. Lost signal. Can't locate on CCTV. Info. He wondered if Nezu thought sending messages like that made him look more enigmatic. But it was annoying as fuck. 2 could play at that game. Last location. What he got in response was a map with a pin in it. He knew that place and was going to drag him back here. No, to the school, so Aizawa could help him yell at him. The teacher didn't want to admit it, but he was just as worried as the rest of them. Hiding behind threats of every day he stays away, the harder the test to pass the year would be. Shoto, he yelled. He hadn't gotten permission from the other boy to use his first name, but if he was going to use him as a glorified teddy bear, he was going to call him his first name. Another beep from his phone came in. We would send heroes, but the 8 precepts are out in force looking for them. Do not attract attention. Get them to UA as quickly and as quietly as possible. Okay, that made sense. He was wondering why Nezu would send students, but the villains had probably connected their thief to the child that the police were looking for. Any known hero would draw unwanted attention. Now how to get him? He stopped and a smile broke out on his face. I don't think I like that expression, Shoto said with a worried expression. You still got access to your old man's credit card. An hour later and several thousand yen later, he was leading Shoto through the woods to the place him and Izuku used to play. For a second he thought he was wrong, then he heard the distinct sound of splashing. A memory came of them as children playing in a mud puddle. Their fathers made them wash off with water from the lake. As they stepped out into the clearing, a little girl with long silver hair and horn froze before dashing behind Izuku. Turning, he smiled at them. It's okay, Eri. Those are my friends. I told you about them. We've come to take your dumbass back to school. I messed up. I wasn't fast enough and someone saw me. They are probably. I have a solution for that. Dry off. He threw the bag with the wig and clothes they bought at his feet. Get dressed. We even found a way to hide the kid. He held out his hand to her, but she cowered. It's okay, Eri. Kaken is a friend. I trust him more than anyone else ever. Promise? She asked, holding her pinky out. Katsuki's heart melted a little. When they were little kids, Izuku was convinced that pinky promises were sacred. He remembered the one they made to be friends forever. Figures he would teach her that. I promise. He connected their pinkies and she ran to him, taking his hand. He led her to the stroller they bought. I don't think I'm going to fit in that, she said skeptically. That is the point. He lifted the little sunscreen that it had and showed her how they had removed the bottom of it and replaced it with a little stadium seat. You sit here, with your feet there and with the shade down and this stupid little frilly thing, no one can see you. She nodded and raised her arms to be picked up. Setting her down inside, he double-checked that nothing could be seen. See, anyone would just pass over thinking we had a baby. She nodded sagely. Who is he and why is he pink? Shoto was coming from the direction of the lake and sure enough he was bright pink. Midoriya couldn't figure out the he gestured around his chest area. And needed help. That's Shoto. He's okay. I know this was your idea, Kaken, and next time we spar I'm going to kick your ass. Izuku came back into sight and Katsuki laughed. It suits you. They had picked a long black wig that tapered into curls mid-back. They has also picked a flowing pink sundress that went all the way down to a pair of black patent leather shoes and a white long-sleeve cropped sweater. No one is going to think that you were the same boy you stole a child from the Yakuza. But do I have to wear women's underwear? He asked, squirming uncomfortably. It will ruin the lines of the dress if you don't. Can we just go before it gets dark? Shoto asked. His face was still red, and he couldn't look Izuku in the eye. Okay, let's go. Stop freaking out cause you got to second base with the nerd. We didn't play baseball, Katsuki. He laughed but noticed how Izuku stilled. They began walking, Katsuki pushing the stroller. What's wrong? Since when are you two on first name basis? Was that jealousy in his voice, the blonde thought. Well, we do sleep in the same bed every night. It would be strange to keep calling him Todoroki. He shrugged. Watching Izuku's face closely, he could see the beginning of a pout. He was jealous. Biting back a gleeful grin, he nudged the boy. It'll be nice to have you with us again though. Shit, I forgot the duffel bag. I grabbed it. Not that you two noticed between your flirting. Shoto responded bitterly. You literally helped him put a bra on, yet are jealous over a little flirting. It's okay, baby. Daddy will give you some attention. He was joking, but something about how Shoto's eyes went big and round and watery hurt his heart. Even Izuku noticed, taking the handle of the stroller from him so he could take the duffel bag from Shoto. He kept fidgeting with his hands and shooting Katsuki these weird, almost scared looks from under his lashes. He looked helplessly at Izuku, who shrugged. He reached out and snagged Shoto by the waist, bringing him into sort of a side hug. Izuku huffed and scooted closer, pouting until he wrapped his other arm around him. Walking together like that was strange, but he was able to feel Izuku tense every time he saw someone he must have recognized from the villain group and let Katsuki lead him away until he relaxed. It took longer than he thought to reach the gates of UA, and the second they passed the threshold, Aizawa and Present Mike came running. Midoriya, is there something you have been wanting to come out and say? Aizawa deadpanned. You know what? I don't care, I feel pretty, he said, pulling away from Katsuki. This is Eri. The shy Hisaki were using her to try to make quirk erasing bullets. He pulled the screen back and Eri looked up at them with a scared-looking wave. Mike squealed at the cuteness and she grabbed the top of the screen, pulling it down to hide again. Todoroki, take her to the infirmary to get checked out. He complied and they looked at them. Does she have a family to return to? He asked. No, she accidentally rewound her mom out of existence, and her grandfather was killed by Kai Chisaki so they could take her. In the future she is adopted by you and your husband. Mike gasped. We have a baby. Katsuki cussed under his breath. Thanks, assholes. Now people owe Shido money. Aizawa's eyes narrowed at Izuku. You didn't know we were married. You were not that subtle in the future when you both were parenting, but no, I didn't. He smiled. Now if there is a way to get me home when I cannot be in a dress, I would like to sleep in my own bed. A grin spread over Aizawa's face, and Izuku went pale. Katsuki hoped he was thinking the same thing he was. He felt bad for abandoning Eri to Mike and Aizawa, but it felt good to sleep in his own bed. Even if he did have to deal with Shoto and Kaken pawing him while they were half asleep to make sure he was still there. Izuku, hurry the fuck up. Other people need to use the bathroom. That was the other thing. Since he had voiced his displeasure, not jealousy, at the two of them using their first names, they had both made a point to call him Izuku at every opportunity. He didn't answer, and the next knock on the door was his mom. Izuku, honey, do you need help? He looked down at the little trickles of blood running down his legs. Yes. She opened the door and he looked up at her with a pout. It's just the sports festival. Can't I stay home? Oh, you poor baby. I should have ran to the store and got you some stockings. It wasn't her fault. He could have said no to coming to school dressed in disguise in the girl's uniform. It was also his idea to shave his legs for authenticity. Come on. She led him to the kitchen and had him sit at the table while she put antibiotic cream on his nicks. He knew that mentally he was an adult, but this made him nostalgic, her treating his wounds. There you are, all better. She smiled at him, her eyes hopeful. Do you want a little makeup? She had always hoped for a bigger family, and a little girl, so Izuku didn't see the harm in indulging her. She got her makeup bag and began to apply some light color to his face. She was putting some mascara on his lashes when Kaken walked out and froze. How do I look, Kaken? He asked, batting his eyes at him. Thankfully, the skirt was long enough that he could wear his own underwear, but he was still wearing the bra from the day before. It gave him the illusion of boobs, and Kaken stared at him long enough that he started to feel self-conscious. Shoto walked in and tilted his head. Pretty, was all he said. It's time to go. Thank you, Shoto. At least someone is a gentleman. Izuku huffed. He wouldn't want to dress like this all the time, but he could admit he was more comfortable than he thought he should be. The wig was a bit itchy though. Okay, so as we walk, if I see anyone I recognize from the 8 precepts, I'll make note of it. Someone might get suspicious if you are walking around writing in a notebook here. It was the limited edition Gang Orca voice recorder that Katsuki had gotten for his 13th birthday. I tested it to make sure it still works. Izuku was so jealous when he got it. You can keep it. Thanks, Kaken. They started off, his mom giving them all hugs, Shoto going last. He all but sank into her and his heart clenched at the sight. I don't know who to cheer for, Izuku said as they walked towards UA. Aizawa had told him in no uncertain terms that he would not be allowed to participate in the sports festival, but he would still have an internship that Aizawa chose for him. He only saw a few of the Yakuza around and made note of each one he recognized and their quirks into the voice recorder. As soon as they got to the school, he was pulled aside to a room where Sir Night-Eye was waiting with a stormy look on his face. Detective Naomasa Tsukachi was standing beside him. Do you have any idea what you have done, you impertinent child? The hero seethed. I rescued a child that was being abused and experimented on, while stopping the production of quirk-erasing bullets that would take Mirio's quirk away, leaving him depressed and quirkless and stopping you from almost dying. Izuku was sick of almost everyone's shit and he ripped off the wig, running his hand through his natural hair. How dare, Mirai. He's telling the truth. The words from the detective stopped the hero in his tracks. Thank you. I wondered why All Might didn't get Detective Tsukachi when he was claiming that I was a spy. That would have cleared everything right up and he might not have tried to kill me. Night-Eye narrowed his eyes at him before they widened in shock. My quirk, it doesn't work on you. It doesn't. I wonder if that's because technically I am from the future and my past is technically the future for you, or if I'm changing things too deliberately. Before he could go off on a mumble spree, Night-Eye broke in. Or maybe no one's quirks work on you, and you are still lying. Closing his eyes, Izuku took a deep breath and turned to the detective. My hair is dyed. I hate Katsuden. I flew to the moon on a little yellow rocket. In another life he had spent some time with Tsukachi, so he noticed every twitch that gave away his lies were registering. By Night-Eye's face he did too. If you are finished, let's talk about the opportunity you are wasting. Most of Chisakai's soldiers are on the street looking for Eri. Wouldn't this be the best time to take them down? When they are scattered and desperate. What do you have in mind? He asked begrudgingly. After he outlined his plan to the heroes, he excused himself to watch the festival. Not really feeling like being caught on camera dressed as a girl, he headed to the announcer's booth. Mike was the only teacher there, with Eri on the floor. She had a fancy little tea set in front of her. He recognized it as a miniature copy of the one Momo brought to the dorms in another life. Eri was just staring at it, lost in thought. I'm sorry that you don't get to give your speech, Mike said from the chair. But Bakugo is about to give his. It was always meant to be his. I'm kinda glad it worked out this way. He sat down in Aizawa's chair smiling as the aforementioned man walked in carrying a pack of cookies and a pitcher of something. He glared at Izuku, daring him to say something as he poured liquid into the toy teapot. He didn't need to worry about that. He was melting at the visual, and by the soft look on Mike's face he was melting too. Turning to pay attention to Katsuki's speech, he focused on his friend. I don't like taking things that I haven't earned, but the dumb nerd that is supposed to be up here did something stupid and can't be here. So I'm going to say the same dumb shit he would have. All of us are here at UA to not only better ourselves, but better the world. So let's go out and do it. Even after all of you lose, let's not lose sight of the future we are trying to make. Let's go. Plus ultra. The last two words were yelled by everyone in the stadium, and Izuku felt himself tear up. He was so proud of Katsuki. That pride grew as he realized Shoto was keeping his lead in the obstacle course by using his fire. It was fun watching his friends work hard for the win, and Mike didn't mind his quirk rambling. In fact, he encouraged it. It wasn't until Monoma stumbled after the finish line, turning red after a rant about how amazing and versatile his quirk was, that Izuku realized that Mike had his hand on the button and everyone could hear their conversations. He was embarrassed, but Mike said he was doing great, so he kept doing it. It was cute how especially Class B would get flustered at his praise. Even some of Class A would turn red when Izuku praised them and their quirks. During the second event, Katsuki and Shoto, who had the top and second scores, teamed up with Kirishima and 𝗧𝗏. They dominated. No one even had a chance. When the one-on-one started, Izuku really didn't know who to cheer for. Shoto was still unsure using his fire, and he faltered when he saw 𝗵𝗏 in the crowd. But to his begrudging respect, the hero only nodded once and kept his seat. The real challenge came in the finals. Like last time, it came down to Katsuki versus Shoto. They fought, and for a second Izuku thought Shoto had him. He wished they had a microphone, because Katsuki advanced and said something that made Shoto startle, and he was able to push him out of the ring. Waiting for the awards ceremony to be over was torture. All he wanted to do was run down and congratulate his friends. His heart swelled when Katsuki reached down and pulled Shoto up onto the #1 podium with him. Everyone was leaving and he ran, rushing through the crowd to get to the dressing rooms. Midoriya, you are back. Tenya stepped in front of him. I wanted to thank you for the intel. He bowed deeply. I just got word that the team my brother put together took down the hero killer with only minimal injuries. I'm so glad. He was. So he tried to not let his impatience show as he looked behind the taller boy. You must want to congratulate your friend, and I am going to go celebrate with my family. I think the room Bakugo was using is just there. Thank you. He rushed to the door, slinging it open only to be met with the sight of Katsuki with his arms around Shoto's waist. Shoto had one hand up, cupping Katsuki's face gently, and their lips were pressed together in a chaste but tender kiss. He had never given much thought to the phrase heartbreak, but he could almost hear the crack from his chest. Forcing a smile to his face, he blinked away tears. Congratulations, you two. First and second place. They broke apart like they had been burned. Izuku, Deku, taking a deep breath, he just smiled wider. I am so proud of both of you, and I'm sure Mom is too. She will probably want to celebrate with you both, so take your showers and get home soon, okay? He turned and fled, putting a bit of his quirk into it, but he could hear them chasing after them. Covering his mouth so they wouldn't hear the sob, he couldn't hold back. A plume of purple smoke surrounded them, and he rushed away, leaving them coughing and sputtering behind him. He barely remembered to grab his wig as he rushed home, throwing himself on his bed and finally letting his sobs out. His mother knocked, but he just asked for some time alone, and when the other two got home, he heard his mom usher them out, taking them out for dinner to celebrate, giving him the privacy he so desperately needed. He would be happy for them, he promised himself, but later. Now he wanted to mourn the future he thought he had a chance for. Why would either of them look twice at him if they had each other? He had officially done it. He had succeeded in destroying two families. After the awkward dinner with 𝐭, and when they came home, Izuku was asleep on the couch. It's okay, 𝐈𝐵. We'll talk to him in the morning. But come morning, Izuku was already gone when they woke up. Shoto, honey, are you okay? 𝐭 asked him at breakfast on the third day of Izuku ignoring them. Are you upset about your father's discipline hearing being postponed? No, ma'am. I figured that would happen. He bit his lip and looked at her. No matter what happens, I can still stay right. Oh, sweetie, of course. She hugged him and he melted into her arms. No matter what, you are always welcome here. She cupped his face with both hands. When you are young, everything feels like life or death, and it must be so much worse for you kids. There is so much pressure on you guys because you are going to be heroes. It's okay to make mistakes. Growing up means you need a place and room to grow. You and Katsuki and Izuku. You guys are my flowers, and I am determined to water you and fertilize you. Actually, that metaphor got away from me a little bit. You're embarrassing, Auntie 𝗏. Let go of his face. I'm the mom. I'm supposed to be embarrassing. She squished his cheeks one more time before letting go. Whatever is going on, you boys will figure it out. Go to school. They left together, Shoto lost in thought. His hand kept brushing against Katsuki's. He felt like a piece of crap. It was obvious to anyone with eyes that Izuku had feelings for Katsuki. And him, well, he didn't know what the fuck he wanted. The only time he had ever felt safe was when he was between them. He didn't even know why he kissed the blonde, and they hadn't talked about it since choosing to ignore whatever it was between them. But he could tell Katsuki was just as troubled by the distance as him. We did nothing wrong. If he doesn't want to be with us, fuck him. Katsuki kicked a rock, cursing under his breath. Wouldn't even fucking listen. You know, I listened to him about this time travel shit. I gave him a chance. You would think he would give me the same fucking courtesy. We betrayed him. No, we fucking didn't. He knew that's where this was heading. The three of us, together. Pausing, Katsuki looked at him, and for the first time he looked unsure. Didn't he? I mean, he's from the future. He would know. Maybe we aren't together in the future. Or maybe we were wrong and he's not even gay. That was enough to give him pause. Wait, did he want to be in a relationship with Katsuki without Izuku? Would Katsuki want him without Izuku? Did he even want a relationship at all? He was spiraling, and the feel of Katsuki's hand sliding into his was the only thing that grounded him. They walked through the gates like that, and Katsuki stopped him short. Hey Deku, the blonde said. Shoto tried to pull his hand away, but Katsuki held tight, and Izuku looked like he had been punched in the stomach. I just wanted to warn you that Endeavor is on campus for a mission. So Shoto wasn't taken by surprise. Izuku swallowed hard and looked away. Can we talk to? It's time. Aizawa came walking up with a blonde girl beside him. So you are Midoriya. You are so cute. I heard you asked for me to help, and I am like totally happy to be here. She threw her arm over Izuku's shoulder, and Inasai is like totes jelly. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Your quirk is going to make this easy. Wait a second. We haven't even started internships yet, and Deku gets to go on a mission. And who is the bimbo? Katsuki looked mad enough to spit fire. Why aren't we involved? You are really rude. Come on, Green Bean. Let's go prepare for our mission. She gave them a smirk as she led him away. Have you ever thought about transferring to 𝗧𝗍𝗄? I have a friend that would totes love you. I could set you up. Shoto felt like his hand was going to break where Katsuki was squeezing it. We are going on this mission. No, you are not. I don't like bringing 2 children with us. I don't want to add 2 more. Midnight is covering homeroom for me. Go to class. Aizawa didn't even give them a chance to argue, turning and walking away. Fuck that. Your shitty dad is on campus. Call him and get us on that mission. I don't think that is a good idea. Katsuki turned fast to face him, and he couldn't help it. He flinched, bringing his arm up to block his face. All the fight and anger leaked from Katsuki really fast. Fuck Sho, I'm sorry. He reached for him, but Shoto stepped back. I can't do this. He felt tears burning in his eyes. Something is missing. He is missing, and I can't. I'll fix it. Katsuki reached for him again, and this time Shoto let him. I promise, I will make him listen to us. And if he still doesn't want us, we can go from there. Shoto threw himself into Katsuki's arms, letting the tears fall. Promise? He asked, his voice soft, broken even to his own ears. I promise. He wasn't avoiding them. He wasn't. He was just giving them time to be together. It wasn't like seeing them felt like an iron heart poker through the heart or anything. It wasn't even like he had anything to feel betrayed about. Neither boy had made him any promises. He had just felt like the 3 of them had been moving towards something. To find out it was just the 2 of them without him. It hurt, but he had to put that aside. They had to take down the members of Chisakai's asshole squad without anyone losing their quirk or die. The plan he came up with, if he did say so himself, was pretty neat. The members of the Yakuza were scattered and looking for Eri. He had convinced the heroes to pull in 𝗵𝗲 from 𝗧𝗍𝗄. Her ability to create illusions would be perfect to lead the members into ambushes one by one. Plus, it would be a good bridge between the students of UA and 𝗧𝗍𝗄. More than once in the future, competition between each group has caused problems. Are you okay, babes? Kami asked him as they walked away. You gotta keep your head in the game. I'm good. He forced a smile, one that he knew she saw through. Not many people outside of 𝗧𝗍𝗄 knew the bimbo act she put on was just that. An act. People assumed because of the way she talked she was an idiot. She used that to gather information and lull villains into a false sense of security. If you are sure, I won't push. But take my number, and if you need someone to talk to, I will be there. She handed him a business card. He knew some people carried them in case someone needed to get in contact with them. But he didn't know 𝗧𝗍𝗄 got them so early. Is everyone clear on the plan? Aizawa asked, getting everyone's attention. We are about to head out. Izuku is going with Bubble Girl to the command center. He was cut off by Endeavor entering, Shoto and Katsuki in tow. No, they have already agreed to be my interns. And have my permission to assist? No. No paperwork has been filed, and they do not know. They can observe from the command center with Midoriya. Endeavor pulled Aizawa away, and they argued quietly, while Shoto and Katsuki stood there awkwardly. Really? You called your daddy to let you in on the mission? That is totes embarrassing. Kami rolled her eyes, and Izuku felt bad at the expression on Shoto's face. Honestly, it's probably the other way around. Endeavor wants to spend some kind of time with Shoto and is forcing him to come. His heart lurched at the grateful smile Shoto gave him. I guess you guys are doing the internship together. He wasn't sure what he would be doing. He didn't participate in the sports festival, so he wasn't sure how he would even get one. Aizawa told him he would deal with it. Midoriya, Todoroki and Bakugo are with you. Don't let them do anything stupid. Izuku nodded, dreading being stuck in a small space with them. You can count on me. They loaded up, Bubble Girl driving him and the other two to the command center. It was a fancy name for an undercover florist truck filled with sound and video equipment. He hadn't been sure that Kami's illusions would show up on screen. But they did. For the first hour it was boring. Anytime either boy would try to talk, either him or Bubble Girl would shush them and point to the screen where the fakery would run in and out of an alley like she was looking for someone. It was a little disheartening how many people would see a child looking distressed and lost, but keep walking depending on someone else to help. Finally, someone in a bird mask walked into view. Look alive, heroes. If I am right, that is Shin-Nemoto. Quirk, confession. Despite not having a combat-oriented quirk, he is highly trained and dangerous. Izuku said into the mic. Kami, can you make the Uri illusion look scared? Like she sees him and wants to get away. It was honestly a little painful watching the fakery run like she was terrified, but worth it as she lured him into the alley. He could hear but not see the fight as they quickly took the man into custody. They moved to the next area and did the same thing, taking down the lower members one by one. If he was correct, then they would have some way to communicate with the higher members of the Shy, and soon, I have eyes on Overhaul. He is flanked by two goons. Quickly he switched to the camera view indicated by Sir Night-Eye. That is Chono and Mimic. Mimic will be easy to take out, unless they have their hands on some trigger, which is a possibility. Long-range quick takedown will be the best option. Kai needs to go first though. Anything you use he can get rid of with his quirk unless, yes, we have all read your analysis. Snipe is on standby with tranq bullets. Sir Night-Eye said, with a bit of an attitude. I think it would be better to take down Chrono first. His quirk is the more dangerous in long-range combat. Kai would have to get a hand on someone to use it. That is not the only. Snipe take the shots. The first dart hit Chrono right in the neck, Kai noticing immediately as the drug worked fast. As they dove for cover, dragging the almost unconscious Chrono, he ripped his glove off and activated his quirk, the man exploding just as the second dart hit Kai. It worked just as fast on Overhaul as it did Chrono, the villain going down quickly. Mimic ran. Before he could merge with anything, the next dart hit him. Congratulations, you did it, and only one death, Izuku said sarcastically into the microphone. He cut it off as Night-Eye began sputtering. Fuck, he yelled as he ripped off the headset. Bubble Girl quickly pushed him aside and took his place, talking softly into the headset. Izuku, Shoto came close and placed his hand on his shoulder. Are you okay? No one was supposed to die. It doesn't matter that it was a villain. I spent days meticulously planning everything with one goal. Take them down without any casualties. We know. Katsuki was by his side running a hand down Shoto's back. It was like a bucket of cold water splashing on him. They had each other. They didn't need him butting into their relationship. He ignored the wounded look as he stepped away. Katsuki stepped closer, reaching for his face. Stop fucking pulling away from us. The last member of the Yakuza just went down. The only injury was, well, you saw. Look on the bright side, kid. At least you can wear pants again. Bubble Girl interrupted the moment, allowing Izuku to step away and breathe. He needed them to stop giving him hope. It hurt more than anything else. They were together, and he had to deal with it. Oh goody, no more skirts, Shoto said, but he sounded disappointed. Izuku wondered if they made fun of him behind his back. Maybe they knew his feelings and laughed at him when he wasn't around. He couldn't blame them. They were the two most attractive people he had ever met. And well, all the makeup in the world couldn't make him any less plain. Let's just go back to school. He refused to look at them. It hurt too much. Bubble Girl didn't say anything as she drove them back to school, seeming to understand his stormy mood. Honestly, he should be happy. The only person who got hurt was one of the villains, but it didn't matter to him. If Night-Eye had just listened, no one would have been killed. No one was unredeemable. They just needed the chance. If you were dead, obviously you couldn't be better. They got back to school after the rest of the heroes. Bubble Girl must have taken the long way to give him some breathing room. This was confirmed when she cursed under her breath at seeing Night-Eye and Aizawa standing waiting for them. He thought he could just walk past, but Night-Eye wouldn't let him. I don't appreciate how you spoke to me. The hero spat. And I don't appreciate you being a bitch, but you don't see me complaining about it. Izuku shot back. Night-Eye reached out and grabbed him by the arm, but Izuku wasn't having it. Without using his quirk, he swung, socking him in the face before storming off. He knew he shouldn't be so worked up. It wasn't like it was one of the heroes who died. But damn it, he didn't become a hero to kill people. His death was not your fault. That is on the bastards who didn't fucking listen to you. I appreciate that, Kaken, but I should have. You did everything you could have. Shoto broke in. Why did they have to follow him? Didn't they understand? The last thing he wanted was to watch them be all cuddly and coupley. Sure enough, when he faced them, They were standing close together, their arms pressed together, and Kaken was gently rubbing the back of his hand against Shoto's in silent, comforting gesture. "Can you two just leave?" he asked, his voice breaking. The look of pain on Shoto's face was enough to make him regret it, but Katsuki got angry. "What the fuck is wrong with you? You." The word tore out of his mouth before he could stop it. "Both of you. You made me think that there was something between us, that all three of us could have something, then you went and left me behind. I know I'm supposed to be older and crap, but in the future me and you, we were leaning towards something. And then I get sent back and I didn't mean to fall in love with Shoto too, but it fucking happened. And before I could figure it out, you both just left me behind. You are so fucking dumb," Kaken said, before grabbing him by the shoulders and pushing him into Shoto. "Hold this." Izuku didn't realize he was talking to the other boy until Shoto took his arms, immobilizing him. "All you had to do was talk to us, dumbass," the blonde said before slamming his mouth onto Izuku's. He froze, not understanding what was happening, and Katsuki bit his lip, a punishment for not letting him in. Gasping, Izuku opened his mouth and Katsuki deepened the kiss, licking into his mouth, exploring, searching. Shoto let go of his arms and looped his around his waist, resting his forehead against his shoulder. With one arm he pulled Katsuki impossibly closer. The other held on to Shoto, trying to ground himself. He felt guilty. Mentally he was an adult. He shouldn't be doing this. His cock shouldn't be hard pressing against the inside of his pants as he shifted his hips against Kaken's. He shouldn't be shivering at the feeling of Shoto's hand against his stomach. "As happy as I am that the three of you figured your shit out, the hallway is not an appropriate place for this display." At Aizawa's voice they broke apart, all three blushing deep and not looking at the teacher. Midoriya detention for punching a hero. He deserved it. Katsuki snapped. "And that is why he isn't serving a week's worth or being expelled. Be grateful, and take your teenage hormones out of my school." He moved away, muttering something about sex ed and how he wasn't paid enough. Izuku felt like his face was on fire. He was blushing so hard. Well, that was awkward. He turned to Shoto, who was pouting a bit. "You are so beautiful." He placed his hand on Shoto's cheek and gently pulled him closer, pressing a soft, chaste kiss on his mouth. To his dismay, instead of making him feel better, the other boy's face crumbled in despair. "What is wrong? You already know, don't you? Because you are from the future. I can't pretend. You know that I'm broken." "What are you talking about?" Katsuki looked confused, but Izuku remembered a conversation from the dual user's birthday one year. Endeavor had been making some noise about an arranged marriage, and Shoto had confessed in the secret of the dorms that he wasn't sure he could perform any kind of marital duties to make children. He just never was interested. "You are not broken." Izuku wrapped him in a hug, and Katsuki, though he still looked a little confused, stepped up and ran his hand through the red and white locks in a comforting gesture. "You were just figuring things out. And you weren't sure when you confided in me, but that doesn't matter. I fell in love with you. You are a kind, passionate, amazing person, and I love you. I don't care if you never want to have sex. Is that what you are worried about, 𝗂𝗧𝗏? I don't give a shit if you never want anyone to touch your junk. Doesn't change a damn thing about the way I feel." He looked at both of them. "About either of you. That means if you want to wait until we're all grown up for anything, 'cause I could almost smell the burning from you overthinking, I will wait." Izuku thought he was in love with Katsuki before, but he could feel his heart swell with his words. "I think there is a lot we should talk. I told you to go home and stop stinking up my hallway with your feelings." Once again they had gotten lost in their conversation long enough for Aizawa to come back armed with a spray bottle of water. They laughed together and ran, the three of them, hand in hand, ready to go home and figure everything out. Something occurred to Izuku after everything had settled and Endeavor's disciplinary hearing was scheduled. As discreetly as he could, he pulled Katsuki aside. "One of us is going to have to tell Mom how Shoto got his scar before she gets blindsided at the hearing." "That's a good thought. Save her the embarrassment of crying in front of everyone. It's going to break her heart." Izuku of course already knew the truth of his scar, but with some encouragement after a hard day of moving into the new bigger apartment, Shoto told his story to them. What Katsuki was apparently unaware of was how protective his mom was of the boy. If it came out in public, the last thing they would have to worry about is tears. And Ko might go full mama bear on Mrs. Todoroki. Then again, the other two were unaware that she had found out what school Mayumi was teaching at and wrote a scathing letter to the head office about what a horrible person she was. They didn't know what, if anything, came of it, but it made his mom feel better. "Also, I want to get some supplies for afterwards." Supplies? Katsuki couldn't be thinking what he was thinking, could he? "Get your head out of the gutter." Katsuki sighed frustratedly. Shoto is, for lack of a better word, traumatized by his childhood. "I thought if we could give him a space to just be a kid. Not a Todoroki, not a hero student, it might help. I was doing some research." Izuku couldn't help it. He grabbed Katsuki and kissed him, pressing his body against the other boy's, tangling his hand in the blonde hair. At his gobsmacked expression, Izuku smiled. "Sorry, that was just sexy. Fucking nerd. Of course you would think research is sexy. No, just you. Caring. taking care of our boyfriend. And wasn't that something? He had a boyfriend, too even. Made him want to kiss Katsuki again, but he controlled himself. I just noticed that he gets kinda, he paused, struggling to find the words. Melty. When I referred to myself as daddy, I thought it was a sex thing. A guilty expression crossed his face. I even took advantage of it during the sports festival. We were getting tired and told him to be a good boy for daddy, and he just kind of folded. You thought it was a sex thing, and you used it during a school festival? He didn't know whether to laugh or smack him. I know, okay. I was just trying to distract him. I didn't think that he would just stop. Izuku could tell he felt guilty. Knowing him, he probably didn't think the win was valid. So, that just leaves one question. Izuku said with a smirk. Were you projecting? What if I called you daddy? Katsuki shivered and Izuku's eyes widened. Oh my god, you do. You like being called daddy. Shut up. Yes, daddy. He ducked out reach of Katsuki's hand, swiping. As punishment for trying to seduce our boyfriend during a school event, you get to go tell mom about Shoto's scar. Have fun. He ran laughing to the room they shared. Shoto, the boy in question, froze. He was just coming out of the bathroom, a towel wrapped around his hip. Did you have a good run? I did. Out of respect, he turned his back and let the other boy get dressed without him watching. When he was told it was okay, he turned back around and sat on their bed. Mom wanted me to ask if there was anything special you wanted to eat tomorrow after the hearing. He laid back and Shoto laid beside him, wrapping his arm around Izuku's waist. I don't care. They just laid there for a few minutes together, basking in each other's presence. They agreed to let Shoto take the lead in any physical affection, and Izuku smiled as he felt lips on his shoulder, then his cheek. Turning his head, he offered his lips, and Shoto took the offer, pressing their lips together. It was sweet and soft, almost lazy. They only broke apart when Katsuki came in, his face pale. Fuck Deku. Thank you for never telling Auntie that I was a shit to you in middle school. What happened? Shoto was so adorable when he was confused. Kaken is just learning how scary my mom can be when she's mad. Nothing to worry about. He pressed a kiss to the corner of Shoto's mouth and reached out to Katsuki. Mama and Ko would never be mean. You think that because you are her favorite. She would never be mean in front of you. He kissed him on the nose and Katsuki climbed into bed behind him. Hey Shoto, Katsuki said as he kissed Izuku's neck. Don't you think Izuku would make a good mommy? Watching Shoto's face as Katsuki asked the question was like watching a cartoon cat. His eyes went wide and his pupils dilated. I bet when we are older and the three of us get married, we can find a quirk to get him pregnant. We are 14, Izuku protested, but breathily as Katsuki's hands roamed. Don't you think it's a little early to be thinking? Katsuki's teeth scraped against his neck and he tried not to moan. Shoto has already been shopping for rings online. If I marry Izuku, I get to keep Ko as a mom. You're just a bonus, Shoto said. You little shit, he said as he lunged over Izuku to tickle Shoto. He smiled as he watched them laugh together, but the hearing tomorrow weighed on him like a storm on the horizon. Ko's favorite animal when she was a child had been ducks. She knew they weren't a particularly interesting animal to love. To her knowledge, there had never been a duck with a quirk. They weren't predators, and they were arguably delicious. But she remembers seeing a video when she was young where rescuers took an orphaned brood of ducklings to a pond where a mother was with another brood. As soon as the ducklings were in the pond, the mama duck didn't hesitate, doubling her children without a thought. That was the kind of mother she wanted to be. Kind, giving, resourceful, and able to roll with whatever life handed her. When her husband decided he didn't want a quirkless child, that was fine. He could roll right out of their lives. She didn't need him. As long as he sent her a check every month, he could go pretend he never had a family. When her baby came to her and told her with tears in his eyes that he was from the future and had died, she looked at him and asked if he wanted her to treat him more like the adult that his mind was, or would he prefer to pretend that he was still just her baby. They had settled on some sort of medium middle ground. Apparently there was some sort of war that led him to missing a big chunk of his childhood with her. And when she watched her baby in real time fall in love with two completely different people, one of whom needed a mother badly, well, sometimes babies needed to learn from heartbreak. She was so glad to have been wrong about that. She had been so worried about her own duckling that she didn't see her two adopted ones falling just as hard. A mother wasn't supposed to have favorites, and she would deny it till the day she died. But there was a soft spot in her heart for the youngest Todoroki. When she found out what his sister and brother said to him, she got angry. She wrote a letter to Fayumi's work detailing how the woman should never be allowed around children and how she victim-blamed an abuse survivor. She wasn't sure what came of it, if anything. She was playing the long game with Natsuo. He was in medical school to be a doctor. She hoped he ended up at the same hospital she was a nurse at. She wasn't a monster. She knew they were probably traumatized themselves. He didn't have anyone. She had assumed the mother was a victim too. But when her sweet Katsuki-kun told her about the tea kettle, she could feel her eye twitch. What kind of mother, no, what kind of woman did that to a child? She shouldn't be allowed to have kids at all, and maybe she should make a point to rip her uterus from her body. Katsuki looked positively green at the suggestion, and she reminded him that most organs were small objects and her quirk was small object attraction. Knowing that facing his family would be extremely hard on him, she did the one thing she was hoping not to do. She used the phone number 𝐵 Todoroki left with her. I was calling to find out what Shoto's favorite food is. I wanted to surprise him tomorrow. He eats whatever you put in front of him. 𝗵𝗃𝗻 always made the food. I know he eats whatever you give him. He's a good boy. But what is his favorite thing to eat? What kind of father didn't know their son's favorite food? Endeavor's silence was telling. What is his favorite color? His favorite game? Do you know anything that I can do to cheer him up after coming face to face with your other crappier children tomorrow? There was a shuffle of paperwork, and after a pause 𝗔 cleared his throat. His favorite restaurant is called Fuji's. Suppressing the need to roll her eyes, 𝐭 asked, did you just check your credit card statement to see where he eats most? I'll send you some money to pay for his food. She tried to respond, but he had already hung up. She went to bed cursing out bad fathers. The hearing was first thing in the morning, and it was mostly boring. The mother, Ray, detailing the abuse she had suffered at the hands of 𝗔 whenever she tried to stop him from overtraining Tauya or Shoto. 𝗏's eyes narrowed when she got to the part where she hurt Shoto. Not going into detail, just claiming that she snapped and hurt him. Shoto shrunk in on himself, and her boys each put an arm around him protectively. Tauya was next and spoke about how he only wanted to be accepted by his father and burnt himself nearly to pieces, waking up in a dingy hospital, and when he tried to come home it seemed everyone forgot about him. The most damning piece of testimony from him was how one day after a few years homeless he had approached Endeavor on the street to ask for help. He would have been around 16 or 17. Before he could reveal himself, Endeavor had pushed him down into a dirty puddle, in his weakened state getting his scars, some that were still open wounds never fully healing. Wet in the filth led to an infection that nearly cost him his life. Then Ray's lawyer called Shoto to talk. He asked him to talk about how 𝗔 trained him. He talked about how the man refused to let him eat until he ran a certain amount of miles in the morning. And when he trained he wasn't teaching him anything, just beating him and expected him to figure it out. At this point Ray had covered her mouth and tears were streaming down her face. He told the court how isolated he was, his father never letting 𝗵𝗃𝗻 and Nezu around him, not wanting the rejects to corrupt his masterpiece. When he said that he never felt human until he moved in with Izuku and 𝗏, she finally lost the battle with her own tears. She had tried to remain calm for her boys. But her poor little duck, even now your father is continuing his control and abuse, isn't he? You are staying with other hero students and not at home with the mother who misses you. Shoto looked confused at that, his head tilting. 𝗏 figured she was the only one who saw the two white-haired siblings stiffen in their seats. No, 𝗵𝗃𝗻 and Nezu told me not to come home. That my presence was not good for Ray and Tauya. Apparently no one had told the lawyer that. Or in fact the woman in question. Even Tauya looked at the two siblings with confused anger. Even when I went to get some clothes they packed a bag for me and left it in the street, not letting me come in. 𝗏 hadn't known that. He had gone to get some stuff, wanting to go alone. She wished she had forced the issue, not wanting him to face that alone. Clearly he hadn't even told Katsuki and Izuku, both of them glaring at the family. Obviously you misheard your siblings. The lawyer started no. He took out his phone, opened his messages and read. You are the reason this family fell apart in the first place. If you had never been born we could have had a family. The mention of your name hurts Mom, and I'm sick of her crying over your existence. Do us all a favor and self-abort yourself so we can be rid of you once and for all. That is the last message I got from Nezu before I blocked his number. I have no more questions. The lawyer red-faced sat down. One of the judges got everyone's attention. We were brought here today to rule on two different matters. One, the matter of a divorce between Todoroki Ray and Todoroki 𝗏. On that, divorce is granted, and I will leave the lawyers to divide assets. On the second matter, the abuse performed by Todoroki 𝗏, usually that is a matter for the Hero Commission, but he declined and gave himself to this court. That shows remorse, and we sentence him to pay restitution of 700,000 yen to each of his victims, and 200 hours of community service. That is all. 𝗏 got up and went to Shoto, wrapping him up in her arms. Because his head was in her neck he didn't see 𝗵𝗃𝗻 and Ray coming toward them. The younger woman reached for him, about to grab him, but 𝗏 quickly pushed him behind her and grabbing the girl by pulling her hair hard. What are you doing? Ray asked as 𝗵𝗃𝗻 shrieked. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were all just grabbing people without their permission. That is what she was about to do, wasn't it? After kicking him from his home and refusing to let him get his things. She may have put a little of her quirk behind it as she yanked again, a chunk of 𝗵𝗃𝗻's hair coming out in her hand before she let go. You can't touch my daughter, and you need to stay away from my son. Ray's mouth opened to argue, and 𝗏 wasn't having it. Yes, I said my son. That child is mine. Ray was taller than her, but she advanced on the woman, staring her down. Because I am a mother. One that protects their children, not burns their face. Because what? You couldn't tell the difference between a 6-year-old child and your 6-foot-tall husband. What kind of woman burns a child because she is so miserable with her lot in life? You are a failure, and if you come near my baby, any of my babies, ever again I will feed you your own eyes. She didn't wait for the gobsmacked woman to retort, just turned on her heels and ushered her 3 boys out of the courtroom. Poor Shoto looked too stricken to handle dinner in a restaurant, so she sent them on ahead and went to the place Angie had told her to go to pick up dinner. Thankfully, the pretty server recognized her description of him and knew what Shoto's favorite thing on the menu was. Ordering katsudon for her and Izuku and something spicy for Kazuki, she headed home. Opening the door, she was met to the sight of her boys on the couch watching old Disney movies, but they froze at her appearance. Shoto was wearing the most adorable footy pajamas covered in penguins, and in his mouth was a green pacifier. They all stared at each other for a second. "It's not a sex thing," Kazuki blurted out. Shoto's eyes filled with tears and he took the pacifier out of his mouth. At least this explained the weird search history on the computer Kazuki borrowed. Well, she always prided herself on the ability to roll with whatever life handed to her. "How about I make some warm milk with honey and cinnamon?" It always helped Izuku relax after a hard day. She smiled at them and all 3 began to relax. "I'll help," Izuku said, hopping up as Kazuki pulled Shoto down so his head was resting on his shoulder. She loved her little family. For the internships, Izuku was conscripted into Aizawa's service, basically helping him train Hitoshi in hand-to-hand and working with him on his quirk. Every day Izuku thought something was going to happen. There was no new league attacks, no Namu. He wondered if this is what school was supposed to be like. But weeks after, still all that happened was school and apologies. The first one came from the most unexpected source. They had spent a few hours after school doing quirkless sparring, and if he slipped into the shower with Kaken it was really just to save water. The environment was important. But after they were all clean and settled into the living room to work on homework and eat, a knock came at the door. Izuku groaned tiredly and got up, opening the door only to find Tauya at the door with a suitcase. The man didn't speak and Izuku just stared at him until Kazuki came up behind him wrapping an arm around his waist. "Hell no. The inn is full and you are not moving in with us just because your family is fucked." Kazuki went to shut the door in his face, but Tauya put his foot in and would not let the door close. "It's the rest of Shoto's things." Tauya pushed his way inside, putting the suitcase down as Shoto came into the hallway. "I didn't know they kicked you out of your own house," he said, not looking at the youngest Todoroki. "Would you have cared if you did?" To anyone else, Shoto looked as stoic as usual, but to the 2 of them who also held their breath for Tauya's answer, they could see just how much the answer mattered. Tauya took a deep breath. "Part of me has hated you for so long, blaming you for just being born." Shoto's shoulders sank and Kazuki looked like he was about to punch the man. "But you are the only one who tried to find me, who helped me." Tauya sank to his knees and rested his head on the ground. "I'm so sorry. You should hate me, but no." Shoto dropped to his knees so fast Izuku winced in sympathy at the crack. "I don't hate you, I never would. I just wanted a family." Shoto pulled him up to a kneeling position and clung to him, crying into his neck. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You have nothing to apologize for." Tauya pulled him closer and blood leaked out of his eyes. Izuku and Kazuki looked at each other, both a little freaked out, before Kazuki cleared his throat. How about we get up off the floor? Come on, icy hot, up we go." He pulled the 2 brothers up and they wiped their faces. "I would like to have a meal with you," Shoto said, almost formally. "I still have Endeavor's credit card. Let's do it." At Tauya's words, Shoto ran and got his wallet and jacket. The look of surprise on the older man's face when he kissed both of them goodbye was funny, and after the door shut, Kazuki looked at Izuku. "So how long do we wait before we follow them to make sure he's safe?" "About 3 minutes. I don't want to risk losing them." Of course, Kazuki was never the most subtle, and Izuku wasn't surprised when they called for their bill on the other side of the restaurant that Shoto had already paid it. The next unexpected apology came at school when Izuku was called into Nezu's office to find All Might in his small form waiting for him. "What do you want?" He knew he sounded hostile, but who could blame him? "I understand you are angry with me, young Midoriya. And with good reason." All Might looked so old and broken Izuku felt his anger melt away. "What can I do for you?" He pulled up a chair and sat down, gesturing for the hero to sit down too. "I'm retiring." Of all the things he thought the man would say, that wasn't it. In another life, only death had made him stop. The shock must have shown on his face because he continued. "Do you remember the notebook you gave Aizawa with all the people who joined All for One? The children who could have been saved? We have been locating and finding them." After Tenko's, he winced and corrected himself. "I mean Tamura's capture at the 𝗧𝗵𝗲, a select group of heroes and myself have been collecting what would have been All for One's League of Villains. And you learned that most of them just had nowhere to go or were treated like crap because of their quirk. Discrimination I unknowingly contributed to." He leaned back in his chair, running his hand down his face and looking his age. He sighed. "The ones we believed we could help have been placed in the custody of heroes we believe could help rehabilitate them. Young Miss Toga is with Vlad. The child that called himself Mustard is with Midnight. The one you referred to as twice is in inpatient therapy at the hospital. Unfortunately, the one who called himself Spinner was too old for the custody route and too mentally capable for the hospital. He'd already done enough to earn him a prison sentence, but I am hoping that we can still rehabilitate him. If that is all, I really need to get back to class. He stood up and went to leave, but All Might, in a gesture that gave him deja vu, sunk to his knees with his head to the floor in apology. Young Midoriya, I am so sorry that I— Get off the floor, you are old. Izuku pulled him up. Listen, I appreciate the apology and I accept it, Izuku sighed, unwilling to continue. You don't forgive me. I needed you. I don't think you understand that. I had just watched everyone around me die, due to my own mistakes, and I got a miracle and I needed you. And you betrayed me. You hit me. You hurt me. Izuku didn't realize how much All Might's betrayal had affected him until the tears started. It was cathartic in a way. It was only the fact that the now retired hero looked like a strong wind would blow him down that kept Izuku from hitting him just to prove a point. I understand, young Midoriya. I hope one day you can forgive this old man his ignorance. It took everything in him not to call the hero back and forgive him as he walked out, but Katsuki was going to be proud of him. He stood up for himself. All Might's apology wasn't the only one that didn't go as the person planned. It was a full month after 𝐭𝐽's ultimatum that either of the other siblings reached out to Shoto. Unlike Tauya, Natsuo called Shoto, the latter unblocking their numbers in hopes that they would reach out. Not even 2 sentences into the phone call, Shoto hung up on his brother and demanded to lay down with them. Fayumi's was even less of an apology, just asking him to come home so they can pretend to be a family again. Apparently she was even pushing Rei to inviting Enji to come home again. Izuku didn't even want to bother with that, plucking the phone from Shoto's grasp and giving it to his mom so she could lecture the young woman. As they got older, school was more of what he imagined it would be if there wasn't a war, them finding their own way without being forced to grow up too quickly. Without the constant threat of the League, they didn't have to get their provisional licenses early or be forced into spotlight heroism from childhood. Of course, Katsuki kept going the spotlight route, aiming to be number one, but Izuku and Shoto took a step back, learning all they could about all forms of heroism. Shoto took a real shine to investigative heroism, using the part of his brain that usually loved conspiracy theories and turning it to crime. Izuku liked to call him his symbol of justice. And the best part of growing up again without a war, Izuku finally got to experiment. It took them a while to find the best rhythm, not wanting Shoto to feel left out, but he just seemed to like being included. Long makeout sessions with whichever one of them was getting their back blown out at the time. And that was a surprise that Katsuki liked taking it as much as he liked giving it. And while the thought of sex was still really on Shoto's radar, he did seem to love to see both of them in silk and lace. Most heroes did have a second job that started as a hobby, and his would end up being photography. His first portfolio was just pictures of Katsuki and Izuku in all sorts of women's lingerie posing for their boyfriend. But as they grew older and started their careers, something seemed off or missing. He felt like he was searching for something even his boyfriends, now fiancés, noticed. One morning a few days before the wedding, he woke up with what felt like a stone in his stomach. Today was the day that the 3 of them died. He had requested off for all of them, not wanting to tempt fate, but there was almost an itch under his skin. He had to see, to know that he really changed the future. Not wanting the others in danger, he begged them to stay home, but they refused, walking with him to the apartment complex that once would have been their tomb. Showing them to the basement, he was telling them what would have happened, taking comfort in the deep breaths that were smoke-free. As he walked into the room where he died, his stomach fell. For a second he was in the smoky basement, holding up a building trying to save a broken little girl with bright red eyes and long curly dark hair. Shoto pushed past him, running to her. The injuries were the same but different. Her legs broken, a bruise covering one side of her face, and blood dripping down into her eyes. But there was no soot, no burns from falling debris. Through the pain she gave him a smile. Mr. Deku, you remembered me. So she's registered as quirkless. All the pain meds and healing quirks they had put the small girl on had made her sleepy. He took the offered file and looked through it himself. Himari Ilto, age 6. Quirkless. Biological father unknown. Biological mother Akira Sato deceased. Car wreck 3 years before. He looked at the dates. She was registered as quirkless when she was 2 years old. The doctor nodded. I thought that was weird too. I took the liberty of calling a friend at the police department in the prefecture where she lived at the time of death. He said some government bigwigs came down about ruling the wreck an accident. They didn't know about the kid. Katsuki snatched the file from him to look for himself. So we need to protect her from some shadow part of the government that might come looking for her. He had been spending way too much time with Shoto, who was listening with a furrowed brow. Did your friend get any names or badge numbers from the official? Something about that name sounds familiar, he said, reading over Katsuki's shoulder. Asaki Aoki. My friend emailed me a copy of the card they left when I said heroes were looking into it. He said he didn't want anything to do with the commission. Fucking damn it. Maybe it was Shoto spending too much time alone with Katsuki. He was starting to talk like him. Remember when Hawks came to Endeavor and basically begged for asylum from the Hero Commission? There was a whole branch of the commission buying kids with powerful quirks and abusing them in the name of training. Of course he remembered that. It was one of the things that he regretted not knowing the truth about and made him believe in fate at the same time. He was fully aware of Hawks' defection to the League, and at the time he went back, he was under the impression that Hawks had just fallen in love. Without the League, he wouldn't fall in love with 𝗬𝗲𝗺 and would remain a hero. He still met 𝗬𝗺, still fell helplessly in love. When the investigation happened, 𝗧𝗑𝗄 realized that Hawks didn't defect because of love. He felt he had no choice. Because 𝗧𝗑𝗄 didn't know. He didn't know Hawks needed to be saved. So she's safe. He flinched at his words. From them at least. They had gotten some of the information out of Himari on the ride to the hospital, while Shoto sent one of the officers he regularly worked with to her foster family to arrest the foster parents. The most recent injuries were from the foster dad throwing her down the stairs into the basement of the apartment complex. Her quirk, which they still didn't really know the name of, was something she could only use on a person once, and she had no idea how to control it. She had used it once on her foster father when they were heading to school, and a villain knocked their train off the tracks, sending him back to the morning it happened. He hadn't been the nicest before that, but now he was absolutely furious with her, hurting her more and more, trying to activate it so he could change his greatest regret. She had looked at them as 𝗧𝗑𝗄 brushed her hair back in the ambulance. I tried to grant his wish, Mr. Deku. I really did. But I couldn't. It broke his heart, and he was glad he was with her instead of the team taking the parents into custody. He was startled out of his thoughts by Katsuki's voice. When can we take her home? If 𝗧𝗑𝗄 hadn't already planning on marrying them in just a few days, he would have fallen to his knees right then. When Katsuki asked the question, Shoto didn't blink, already on the phone arranging for someone to deliver kids' furniture to their home and air out the spare room. You really mean it? We can try to adopt her. Tears filled his eyes as he wrapped his arms around the blonde. Shoto still murmuring into his phone, rubbing his back as he fought back from sobbing. The doctor smiled. I will get the emergency foster paperwork started and her discharge papers. She should be waking up if you want to go tell her. They filed into her room. Like the doctor said, her eyes were just fluttering open. The second she laid eyes on 𝗧𝗑𝗄, she burst into tears, loud sobs that tugged on his heartstrings. Oh no, sweetie, what's wrong? Later Katsuki would tell him he looked so much like his mom, hovering and wringing his hands, that he had a hard time not laughing and making everything worse. I thought I was dreaming. You really came for me. Shoto made a wounded noise in his throat and stepped forward, handing her some tissue. Of course we did, honey. You saved all our lives. I'm sorry we didn't find you earlier. So you remember sending me back in time. He didn't want to scare her, but this quirk was fascinating. I remember everything every time I send someone back to grant their wish. When I helped you, it was the first time I made a wish. He guessed that was how she thought about it, as granting a wish. In reality, it was more of sending someone's consciousness back to a former spot in time. And what did you wish for? I wished you were my daddy. Well, that's not happening. He turned to Katsuki with a stricken look on his face. What? We agreed when we were 14. When we have kids, you're the mommy. I'm daddy. Show can be papa. Or poppy. It took her a second to register what he was saying before once again she burst into tears. Yep, that looks like she can be your daughter. Curly hair and cries at the drop of a hat. Do you want to be the flower girl in our wedding? It was supposed to be Denki, but he didn't want to wear the dress. I can take you shopping. Can you give the girl some room? You are overwhelming her. He pushed them away and used a tissue to clean the tears from her cheeks. What my loving but idiot fiancés are trying to say is, if you want to come home with us, that we will take care of you. The doctor came back just as she threw herself into his arms with a sob. It was the beginning of their happy ending. And their family. The end.